There we go.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please? Sorry, our TAP TV system was being moved today, so all of our equipment is a little different. So we're a little coming up to speed, just a little bit slow. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Lingle?
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck?
Present.
Councilmember Costa? Present. Mayor Pro Tem Dwayne Holmdahl?
Here.
Mayor John Lind?
Here. And now we're going to do things just slightly out of order. If you would all please rise. And we'll have a presentation of the colors by the Campfire Kids. Proceed. You need to go right over there to that microphone. Can you pull it down for us? Good. Keep going. Get it down all the way down. There you go.
Color guard advance.
All right.
Place the colors. Will you all please say the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color guard, retreat. Oh, for sure I got it.
And now, pitch hitting for Darren Hunt, we have Reverend Michael Cunningham. Reverend?
Let us pray. Almighty God, teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that they may be trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society. Bless this city of Lompoc, bless these members of our city council, and send down upon them the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all. We ask this for the glory of your name and the welfare of your holy people. Amen.
On March 8th, I made a presentation of a proclamation to Phyllis Anderson honoring Ray Anderson for his initiative in forming the Lompoc Little League at the opening day of the Lompoc Little League, and a good time was had by all. On March 13th, I was out of town, and Councilmember Costa was nice enough to help by presenting a proclamation to Emily Vargas Smith on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of Vargas Jewelers, so a long-time community business that has been a great donor to so many things in our community. And now we have two proclamations this evening. Are you here for Arbor Day? Come on down. So the first is Arbor Day, which is very special in Lompoc from several directions. Whereas Arbor Day is a day dedicated to trees and their preservation, and whereas trees provide a quality living environment and enhance the social, cultural, sensory, and economic dimensions of our city. And whereas we must ensure the future of our urban forest for ourselves as well as our children and our children's children. And whereas the City of Lompoc, in partnership with its citizens and the Lompoc Beautification Commission, encourage all residents of the city and the valley to observe Arbor Day by planting a tree on their property or taking advantage of the city's ongoing tree planting program. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim Saturday, March 22nd, 2014, as Arbor Day in the City of Lompoc, and urge our citizens to plant trees in places and replace lost trees so that the entire Lompoc Valley will continue to be a valley of distinction and beauty and Tree City, USA, right? And we also have our Arbor Day celebration, which I think you'll cover on Saturday, naming some new folks to our recognition grove. Thank you for your hard work.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the proclamation. Arbor Day will take place this Saturday, the 22nd. It will start at 10 a.m. The people that will be honored will be James Hall, Katrina Hall, husband and wife, Martha Gillespie, and Patricia Lizarraga. We did something a little bit different this year. Normally, each honoree will get their own tree and their own plaque. We felt the two commissions, Parks and Rec Commission and the Beautification Appearance Commission, got together, and we felt that it would be a really good idea not to have the married spouses separated. So we're actually taking the plaque off Mr. Lizarraga's tree, who he got honored a couple of years ago. We added his wife Patricia to a plaque with his name on it also, so it's very special. They're going to share the same tree. Same with the Halls. They're going to share a plaque and the tree, so it should be really cool. We're excited about this event. Anyway, so 10 a.m., we're going to have refreshments, coffee, goodies to eat, and we'll start promptly at 10 a.m., and everybody's welcome, the council, public, so it should be a good event. Thank you.
So we hope we'll see all of you at Beatty Park. We usually have a nice large crowd, and we'd love to have you there also. Now, come on down, kids. It's the Absolutely Incredible Kid Day. Wait a minute. What do we do with the absolutely incredible adult that leads these kids? I know how long she's been dedicated to this because it's longer than I've been working a booth at the Flower Festival, because she was there before we were in the Boy Scouts. So almost forever. Yeah. Thank you very much. Whereas March 20th, 2014 has been declared by Campfire USA as a national youth development organization as Absolutely Incredible Kid Day. And whereas Campfire USA commemorates its 18th annual Absolutely Incredible Kid Day on this date. And whereas, as part of the celebration of children on this date, adults are encouraged to send letters of love and appreciation to young people in their lives. And whereas, as Campfire USA mission pledges a firm commitment to building caring, confident youth and future leaders, an extension of that commitment is handled to caring adults through this event to express their feelings in a letter or a note, which has the profound ability to make a lasting and positive impact on children in our community. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim March 20th, 2014 as Absolutely Incredible Kid Day, and urge all the adults, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, teachers, mentors, friends, and adults alike to participate and make a difference in the life of a child. Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Tampa, and I would like to tell you about Absolutely Incredible Kid Day. March 20th is Campfire's 15th annual Absolutely Incredible Kid Day. Annually, we invite all adults to write letters of love and support to the children of America. Sometimes adults forget to stop and tell a child just how important he or she is. Absolutely Incredible Kid Day is just a reminder to do that. A letter is personal and something a child can hold on to for years to come. The right words of encouragement can help a child make better decisions, build self-esteem, and even be more compassionate and successful.
Hello, I'm Jamie, and I would like to present you with some stationery to write letters to incredible kids you know and some posters to hang in public places to encourage others to write letters on March 20th. You can mail the letters, put on a pillow or a lunchbox.
Hi, I am Sage, and I would like to present you with a campfire candy as a token of appreciation for allowing us to present information about Absolutely Incredible Kids Day. We would like to encourage every adult to write a letter of love, support, and appreciation to a child on March 20th. Thank you from the Hyde Park Hot Ad Campfire Club.
Thank you. Where's our weed?
Yeah. There's obviously a mayor in training out there at proclamation reading. Okay, the city administrator's executive director's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, folks. Just a quick review. I've got a few speaking engagements coming up, and kicks off tomorrow evening with the Rotary Club, then a little session with a meet and greet session with the grand jury Thursday morning, then the Chamber of Commerce luncheon on Thursday midday. We have the medical center's leaders breakfast. Friday morning we have a group, Boys and Girls Club, at the Boys and Girls Club. Mayor and I will be attending a leadership, Lompoc Valley leadership luncheon, meet and greet, and answer questions on a focus of local government. And so it's a busy time going around, and just having those, both listening to folks and in a couple cases having some presentations to make. I've just been continuing doing our tour of facilities and getting ready and building toward next week's mid-year budget review. So, and the normal daily operational imperatives running the city. But that's about it right now. Thanks.
Thank you. This is our opportunity for opening oral communications. This is where you can talk to us for 30 seconds on any subject. 5 minutes. Just wanted to see if Ken was awake.
Yeah, I am. It won't take much longer than that tonight. So, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, Ken Austin, Lompoc Valley Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau. Just a couple of real quick things. I know Teresa just sent out the semi-annual report to all of you. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. If you haven't, please look at it. If you have questions, give me a call. Be happy to try and answer the questions. Big event coming up for us is our Shop Lompoc, Sip Lompoc. We're now including some wineries in that event this year. We're going to have two events, one on May 17th and one on the National Shop Small Day on November 29th. So check out the website. The information's on there. Get the word out to folks. And again, as Patrick mentioned, our luncheon on Thursday is going to be a big one. I think we're going to have a room filled to capacity, so they're excited to hear what he has to share with them, and we're excited to have him. So I'm mad at the Rotary Club, though they beat me to the punch, and I was trying to be the first one to get him out there, but that's okay. And just real quick, the mayor mentioned the proclamations earlier for Lompoc Little League and the Anderson family. I was very pleased to be a part of that event. It was fantastic. Fantastic day for the family, the Anderson family, as well as the Vargas jeweler when Councilmember Costa presented the proclamation to Emily Vargas Smith. It was a big day, 40 years in business, and all 40 years they've been members of the chamber. So congratulations to them, and thank you, Council. Any questions for me? That was almost 30 seconds.
I think you got off light. Thanks, Ken.
Okay.
Who's next?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, staff, and the public. My name is Susan Lindman, and I'm president of the board of Valley Haven Adult Day Program. And we have such good news to present to you tonight. Today we had our ribbon cutting ceremony at our new facility at the corner of 3rd and Maple Street. We had a very nice presentation by the Chamber of Commerce, had pictures taken, had a really good time. We're so pleased to be a part of Lompoc City. For 13 years, we were situated at the St. Mary's Episcopal Church, and we had a great time there. They were very good to us, very kind. But about 2 years ago, the board decided that we needed to have our very own place so that we could expand our program to include Thursdays, afternoons after 3 o'clock, and perhaps time on Saturdays so that people who were full-time caregivers could have some time off. Our program benefits seniors, yes, but it also benefits the caregivers. The respite care that we give when their senior is at our program from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon is critical for most caregivers. We have a bus that picks people up in the morning and transports them to the facility. They have snacks in the morning and afternoon, a full lunch, and then we take them home again. So we're very proud to be part of the city of Lompoc. We have a wonderful new house. We hope that people will call us for a tour and come and see it. We have room for more participants. So again, I just thank you. I wanted to bring some good news and say that we're very happy with our new location. Thank you.
Tell them your phone number.
My phone number is 733-3600. That's at home. But 688-0850 will also get you the staff at Valley Haven.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not yet, Chuck. Not yet. We'll get to you in a minute. I know what he's here for, so. Okay, anyone else for oral communications? Seeing none, we'll close oral communications and we'll come back to the consent calendar. On the consent calendar, we have the approval of the minutes of February 18th. We have approval of expenditures, payroll in the amount of $1,073,000, voucher register $504,000, voucher register $300,000, credit refunds $1,100, electronic payments $2.8 million, and Councilmember Costa has a comment with regard to check 318293 for $22,534.49 made out to CAC.
I'll be abstaining from that check voucher. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Item number 3, final acceptance of the R Street and Ocean Avenue traffic signal, and I'm going to pull that one at this time, and I'll discuss it at the end. Item number 4, approval and execution of a memorandum of understanding for shared use between the City of Lompoc and the Allen Hancock Junior College, Joint Community College District. Sorry about that, I slipped back 35, 40 years. Amendment, item number 5, amendment to the long-term ground lease agreement for hangar construction and aircraft storage at the Lompoc Airport for Renee Minares, DBA Barnstormers. Item number 6, award project FY11-S-2, the Chestnut Avenue Sidewalk Improvement Project. And item number 7, the PBX Private Branch Exchange Phone System Upgrade Purchase. Other than the item I pulled, is there an item any other council member would like to pull? Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull for discussion agenda item number 5.
5, okay. Anything else? Okay, seeing no other lights, I would accept a motion for the balance of the consent agenda except 2 items that were pulled.
I'll move the acceptance.
I'll second.
Okay. And is there any further discussion on those items? Seeing no lights, could we vote, please? Okay. Ready, set, go? And that passes 5-0. Thank you. We'll come back to the item that I wanted to pull first, and I actually want to continue this item to the next meeting. It's come to my attention that a local contractor has filed a lien against the contractor for non-payment under this, and city staff has verified that the lien is correctly filed, and I'd like to continue this item to the next meeting so that the staff can meet with the contractor to resolve the lien, which we would then have to hold the money for until it was resolved. So I'd just like to get it resolved so we're not in the middle of this. That's item number 3. No, it's the Ocean Avenue traffic signal. There's a contract dispute on there, and I'd just like to get it resolved before we pass it and go forward. So I'm going to move that we continue this item to the next meeting, and I would need a second.
Mayor Lynn, my assumption is that the city administrator is aware of this.
Yes, we've discussed this.
Okay, and
Go ahead.
Right. Mayor made me aware of his intention to pull and ask for a deferral to the item. It just, in a matter of full disclosure, it does involve between the current item before us and the other issue to which he refers, it does involve the same contractor but under a different contract, if that makes sense. So
why would we need to pull this item if it's a different contract that there's issues?
This one is the one that has an issue, not the other one.
Sorry, did I mishear that?
Right now there is a dispute involving between a contractor and a subcontractor. The same contractor is now before you on a different, the item before you that the mayor is asking to defer.
I see.
Is with the same contractor, but it's a different
Unrelated
contract.
I see.
Yeah. So I'm still looking for a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And the motion is to return it to staff and bring it back next meeting. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
that is something that can come back on consent if,
Yeah, it would come back on consent again.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. City Administrator?
Can you give me a moment?
Sure.
May I ask for a moment of privilege?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, everybody stand up, take a stretch.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mayor, and I believe we're good to proceed with the motion in the second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, can we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. And now, with regard to item 5 that Councilmember Lingle pulled.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to discuss this a little bit and have the council discuss it. On this issue or this item, we've had a policy, we've had a procedure in the past to have a surety bond issued for something like this. Now we're asking for something other than the surety bond for financial reasons for the individual. But I believe, and under the fiscal impact, the last sentence in the first paragraph, it says, the actual fiscal impact cannot be known at this time with these variables. I'm just really uncomfortable with passing this, and at least, especially since we don't have a policy to address this item. We're sort of going outside of what we've been doing in the past. If we're going to be doing something like this, going something without a surety bond, I believe the city should have a policy to address it, and instead of just bringing it forward to us saying, well, we're not sure what the fiscal impact is going to be. So I'd like maybe some discussion from the rest of the council. If everyone else is comfortable with this, maybe we go forward with it. Those are my concerns.
Sure. If I might respond. In my experience, usually for arrangements such as this, the method or the instrument that's used to ensure performance, that is, to ensure that the project gets completed by the project proponent, is a performance bond. However, it is not uncommon to use alternate forms of security, including cash in lieu or a cash placed into an escrow account that goes toward drawing down and doing the construction of the project, that can be set in such a way to be available for the city to intervene, make use of those same funds to complete the project. In some cases, the ability of the city to recover funds out of an escrow account may be less onerous even than they might be from an insurer who's providing a performance bond. It really depends on the situation. So in this particular case, the Barnstormers Aero Services is requesting that they be able to do a cash in lieu. Which normally I would be, as long as there is an adequate amount that's set aside and available for what it would cost the city to complete the project, I would normally consider that to be adequate security for the city. Again, we're not asking to change within the existing agreement, whatever the form of security, and in that case it talks particularly about a surety, is to be done to the satisfaction of our finance director. So in this case, Mr. Wilkie and his expertise would make a final determination of whatever instrument we're using as to whether it's adequate from ensuring as best we can, the city's fiscal exposure. It was the city attorney's observation that for us to change or have available other options of security, we needed to bring this item before you because it specifically was saying surety, which was indicating the presence of a third-party insurer as opposed to this instrument, this alternative instrument, which is a form of security. The lessee in this case is asking for that change because they have the cash available to be able to set into an account. That's what they've represented. And they'd like to avoid what they believe is around a $4,000 cost to provide the bond. So that's what's happening before you. And the reason we're bringing the particular item to you as opposed to bringing a policy change is the lessee wishes to proceed on with this project, and he's sees time as being of the essence. So in our trying to be business friendly, we're bringing the item to you, but certainly it does involve a policy call. I don't know, apparently the city attorney has something to add.
Through the mayor.
Sure.
To say it another way, if the agreement had originally had a provision that allowed the escrow or some set of funding to provide the security, neither your city administrator or your city attorney would have had any issue with that. It's because the agreement that was approved specifically said there was going to be a surety, which meant a third party, which is why I felt it had to come to you. So we don't have hesitation on the substance. It was the path that was being used, and we didn't feel comfortable, or I didn't feel comfortable changing that path without coming back to you.
Okay. And Mr. City Attorney, you had mentioned this would make it easier for the person to proceed with the project. I understand the project has actually already begun. Is that true?
To the best of my knowledge, the project is underway, but not to the point where the city would need to intervene to complete the project. It's not substantially progressed to the point we couldn't merely clear out the materials off of site. The portions of the project are materials for the hangar have been delivered on site, and there has been preliminary design and submission of approval of plans to the Public Works Department, who are prepared now. They have reviewed and are prepared to sign off, but have not signed pending resolution of this issue.
Okay.
So I'm going to get a word in here. From some past experience in the construction world, money in escrow with a well-written agreement, which I know our city attorney will take care of, is a lot easier than to cash in on than a surety bond, because depending on the bonding company, some are pretty forthright, and some of them, it can be a fairly long, protracted legal battle to get paid. And I don't think that's the case with the applicant here. Frankly, I think the reason he's most interested in is to save $4,000 worth of cost in getting his building up. So I think number one, we're better protected than we would be if we had a bond, or at a very minimum, we're equally protected. And I always want to try to save somebody money when it doesn't cost us anything. So I think you're next, Councilmember Holmdahl.
Yeah, I agree. If you got cash in hand, it's a lot better than waiting for it in the future. So if the city agrees that the $4,000, I mean, the amount of cash that he's going to put up will cover the construction of it, I think it's much better having that cash than having it in a bond.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Councilmember Lingle, I'm just curious what sparked your interest in this, if you just came across it, or if there was information you were provided, or an email or concern?
Well, thank you. Yes, I was providing information that the project had already begun before it came before us. And then I saw the city attorney's comment that he had some concerns about it. And then the other thing was the fiscal impact, where it says the actual fiscal impact cannot be known at this time. So, I mean, we're addressing something where we don't know where the total fiscal impact to the city is. So it was the three items, but mainly the fiscal impact of the city, the unknown there.
I think that hopefully the city administrator has quelled some of your fears in regards to the project, maybe not technically starting, technically, although I think that allowing somebody to put materials is almost a promise that things can continue, so I think that there's a gray area. But I am curious if what Councilmember Lingle said would be a good idea for us to sort of establish a policy that would allow you these alternative instruments, so that way you wouldn't have to come back in the future if it wasn't a surety, if that's something we can do relatively easily or not.
And I wanted to clarify, if I could, Mayor, that the statement about being uncertain of the ultimate fiscal impact would have been the same even if you just asked, if we didn't have this item where there's a request of the change of the type of security. If we were sitting there with a bond, and you asked me, what's our fiscal impact, I would have the same response. I wouldn't be able to know for sure until it played out. We don't know how much it would cost us to, if we have a $100,000 bond out there, we're not sure what it would cost us to recover our bond.
So I'm comfortable with taking or utilizing this instrument, so to speak. But I would be interested in seeing if we could get some policy language that would then allow staff to move forward with a certain set of instruments in the future without needing to come to council with that language.
City Attorney.
Based on how the council acts tonight, my plan would be to make sure that our agreements have flexibility written into them rather than have them be so specific. If you want us to come back to you with a policy to direct us to do that, you can, but I don't think I think we understand the direction and can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I just wanted to complete my thought really quickly, if that's
Sure.
all right. My only ever concern is that you're not going to be the city administrator forever, right? So if there's somebody new in your seat in however long, if in their opinion, there should be some...
You said city administrator.
Oh, you're a city clerk. No, I'm just kidding. Well, you're not going to be our city administrator forever. So the argument still stands that although I think that changing it to more flexible language would work, and the hope would be that it would become a trend that is then utilized in the future, is there any concern for you that if you were outside of your position and somebody else came in, that then they could sort of change it back, or do they use the precedent of previous?
Most likely that's what would happen, is they would use the same contract form that we created, which would include the greater flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd be looking for a motion to...
I would move that we really...
No, it's a consent item. We just pull it off for a little quick discussion. And with your motion, the understanding would be that this would be policy going forward. That
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And a second.
I'll second.
And is there any discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay. And now we come to item 8. Lucille.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, members of the public. The item before you is the City Council discussion of potential additions to the language in the city's recently adopted 2030 General Plan, Phase 1, Land Use and Circulation Elements, and a request to authorize Amendment Number 3 to the consultant contract for the 2030 General Plan update, the addition of the economic development element and the required housing element. It's recommended that the City Council consider the proposed language changes to the 2030 land use and circulation elements and provide direction to the Planning Commission and staff, and review the proposed amendment to the consultant contract for preparation of the economic development and the housing element for the 2030 general plan. We're requesting that the council authorize the city administrator to sign contract amendments, number 3 for the economic development amendment element and number 4 for the housing element. The housing element will not exceed the $40,000 that was budgeted in the planning division budget for 2013 to 15. The amendment number 3 for the economic development element was presented in your staff report, and the amount came to $6,541. The funds for that are available, and they will not be general fund funds. They are available in the contingency for the general plan and in our general plan maintenance fee. The council adopted the phase 1 elements November 19th of 2013, and at that meeting, council members indicated that there is a desire to possibly make some minor modifications to the land use element language, and it was agreed that staff would return to the council to discuss those potential changes. We did receive proposals from the mayor, from council members Costa and Starbuck, and they are discussed in the staff report. The 2014 and January of 2014, the council directed the addition of the new economic development element, and with our contract amendment number 3, the environmental consultant will work with that. We're intending to take it to the Economic Development Committee in April for a first review of it, before it goes to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately with that recommendation forward to the council. As you will recall, the housing element is the only general plan element that must be completed and certified by the state. It's a very technical element, was last updated in October of 2010, and our new update must be accepted by the state by February of 2015. So the amendment number 4 would authorize us to proceed with that. It will proceed on a concurrent path with the Phase 2, but because we have no way to gauge the response or the ability to work with housing and community development at the state, it will not necessarily be approved at exactly the same time. However, we will have to have it done by February of 2015. So additionally, at the joint meeting with the City Council and the Planning Commission, there was a schedule that was presented that the Council accepted for Phase 2. The Planning Commission has refined that. We did attach it to your staff report, and it's got specific dates attached to workshops and meetings, and that is with the goal of a final recommendation to the Council in September of 2014. So that completes my staff report, and Mr. Richard Dalton, our environmental consultant, is here available to answer any questions that the Council may have regarding anything in the staff report, or we can clarify anything for you.
Richard, you got anything to say to start with? Come on, you came all the way down here? Okay. All right, are there any questions at this time? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ms. Breeze, I have a quick question, 2 quick questions. The first is that it seems like within the requests of the 3 council members, there are those requests that can be done relatively easily and changes can be made, those that would have to go back to Planning Commission for review, and then those that would potentially require more environmental analysis. I'm seeing that in 3 buckets. Is there 3 or is there only 2? Would everything have to go back to Planning Commission? It sounded like that wouldn't be the case.
The language proposals, everything would pretty much have to go back to the Planning Commission ultimately for review and then recommendation forward to the Council with the ultimate elements.
Okay, so then there is 2 buckets. Everything that has to go back to Planning Commission but doesn't require more environmental analysis, and then everything that goes to Planning Commission but does require additional environmental analysis.
Pretty much that is the way it breaks out.
And so I know that we are on this aggressive timeline, and that's part of the challenge here is deciding, we understand that these are things that we would like changed, but if we want to stay on the aggressive timeline, we have to decide what's a priority currently. Is that your thinking?
Well, the way that we broke it out for you in analyzing the requests that we received from the Council, there are elements that there are language changes that can be incorporated easily and would require no additional environmental review. So those going back to the Planning Commission, they would look at the elements, just include that language forward in the recommendation to Council. Things that are more complicated or there's a number of items that are more geared towards the implementation measures of the general plan and would generally be considered with the zoning ordinance update.
Okay, so it sounds like, I'm sorry if I'm repeating you, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this, that for those items that have no additional environmental review requirement, we can still continue with the aggressive schedule in conjunction with those minor changes.
That's correct.
Okay, I wanted to make that clear. Now, once we jump into those things with environmental review, we're not really sure, yeah, that's a whole new ballgame essentially.
It does become more difficult in order to move them forward. It is one of those, if you're making changes that are going to require consideration of the environmental document, reopening of the environmental document, or further analysis, then that would take the schedule and put it aside, and we would follow council direction and proceed.
Now, for those things that need additional environmental review, or I guess to review if there is more environmental review needed, I think I said that right, how quickly then could we start with a general plan amendment for those things as opposed to doing it with this process? Would we have to wait through the schedule and start it then, or is it something that can get started concurrently?
I would generally wait. Anything that has to do with the zoning ordinance would wait until the zoning ordinance update, which would be at the completion of phase 1, or phase 2, I mean.
Which currently is scheduled for when?
The completion of phase 2 is scheduled for September of 2014.
September of this year. Okay. Yeah, that was the attachment. I just wanted, I'm trying to paint a picture here with these questions, so thank you.
Let me just ask one question, Bob, and then I'll come to you. I think the one thing that was noted on there that didn't have to go back to the Planning Commission would be a name change for mixed use. Not changing the ordinance, but just changing the name. Am I correct in that?
If that's the council direction to change the name, we can do that. That would require, however, we will have to update the ordinance and the maps. So it would have to go, generally it would go back to Planning Commission for their action.
Generally, or has to?
Well, I mean, they would have to look at it and recommend it forward to council.
Okay. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Costa answered many of my questions, but here again, just for clarification, is there anything that's being requested tonight on these changes that could not be done after zoning? I mean, is there any reason why we have to do any of this tonight? It could all be done after the zoning, possibly.
With the zoning after phase 2?
Phase 2, yes.
However, yes, that is the case.
Because my concern, Lucille, I think you and I have been working on this
a few years.
Over 6 years, 6 or 7 years now. So I hate to, we finally have a schedule, and I think it's a doable schedule. I'd hate to put this schedule in jeopardy right now, because we've been going down a road for several years right now where we're never going to see the end of this road. So I just have to tell the council that I'm probably going to be opposed to anything that's going to put us beyond the schedule of September of 14, completion of phase 2. So thank you.
I would prefer that council members not discuss how they're thinking about voting when we haven't even taken public comment yet, just for all the rest of you, because it kind of makes the public feel like, why am I coming to talk? Okay, Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that my comments in here were answered by staff several months ago, and I have no concerns. It was answered. I'm satisfied with the answer, and I have no desire to change the circulation element on O and V. I understand exactly what's happening there, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Councilmember Lingle, I just wanted to point out that for most of, I believe all of the recommendations that I've made, I don't believe additional environmental review would be required, and so I don't believe it would take us off track of that aggressive schedule. I think that those are things that can be reviewed by the Planning Commission concurrently and proposed with the Phase 2 recommendations. Is that correct, Ms. Breeze?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions at this time? Okay, now I'd like to open this to oral communications. This is your opportunity to come and talk to us about this item.
The capacity to turn on the projector. I can project pictures through there. You have the VGA.
You check with him and see.
Hard. I don't know if I did that right. Okay.
Do you want to wait a minute until he gets it all set up for you?
Sure. If somebody else wants to go.
Come on, Ron, you can go first.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, and also let the record show that the clock on the wall is off by an hour.
Only an hour?
Yeah.
Geez, I thought it was early. Good evening. My name is Ron Fink. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, have been for 14 years, but I'm here tonight speaking for myself. 7 of those years, by the way, I've been working on this general plan update. So, just to put it in perspective. You have a plan before you so we can finish phase 2. But you also have a fairly long list of things that need to be done. I think it's time to stop adding ingredients to the soup. We can add salt later if we want to. Okay? This issue's been before you several times, and the Planning Commission has held many public hearings and spent numerous hours discussing the update you recently approved in excruciating detail. Each time you tinker with the general plan, it sets the process back several months, and I'm sure you'll remember when you send it back to us, it don't always come back real quick. It takes sometimes quite a while for things to get back to you. To continue what appears to be an endless do loop is counterproductive. People who have money to invest in Lompoc want to know how the community views future growth, and failing to adopt our blueprint for the future in a timely manner may send a message of indecisiveness to investors and developers who will look elsewhere to invest their money. The items listed some of the items listed in the staff report could involve substantial public input, cost valuable general fund resources, and at the end of the public process may not produce the result you envision. Neither the Planning Commission nor the City Council can just wave a magic wand to make this stuff happen. There's a very detailed public process that has to be followed to get these things back to you and recommended to you. Some of the suggested changes may necessitate an EIR amendment or additional costly studies, a process that could take many months to complete. I guess the cautionary note is, let's not delay phase 2. Planning Commission has committed to an aggressive schedule. We looked at it very carefully, and we believe that we can achieve this schedule. We've already had outreach to several of the commissions and staff to begin discussing how they're involved with phase 2 and how they can make their input to us. You may have seen me at a couple of those meetings. Right after that, we can start working on a comprehensive zoning ordinance. I would say almost all of the things that are included in your list can be discussed during the zoning ordinance update. That's the appropriate time to do it. Finally, it'd be nice if we could finish this before the 8th year of this process starts. Thank you.
Mr. Fink, just a quick question. While you're there, and for the public, could you explain why the general plan is so important?
The general plan is basically the constitution of the city. It's the foundation for everything that the city does. If you look at the general plan, the phase 1 elements are what we want to do, and the phase 2 elements are how we're going to support it with city services. So completing this general plan and getting it up to date will bring us up to what we're doing. If we don't have the general plan complete, then, basically the city keeps moving along as it did with the general plan that was developed in 1997. I think we've moved beyond that. This is 2014. We need to catch up. We need to update the public services area of this, the safety area, and all of the other elements need to be updated so that we can catch up to where we're at and move on beyond to 2030. That's why it's so important to complete this process. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Warren Culberson, and I'm here to talk about 415 West Laurel, the building you see before you. I've written everything down, so I'll be fast. My objective this evening tonight is to get you to convert the zoning for 415 West Laurel Avenue from R3 to its original zoning of light industrial. I intend to achieve this objective by using 3 points. 1, the property should never have been zoned R3 in the first place. 2, the law supports zoning it as light industrial. And 3, light industrial and residential are completely compatible and get along just fine. It's not a matter of business versus residential. It's a matter of quality of neighbor. Go on. Oh. There we go. Yeah, my dog. All right. First, let me get to point number 1. Cute puppies come later. First, Culberson Construction Company purchased the lot in 1959 for the purpose of building an industrial building because the lot was zoned light industrial. The building was built in 1959 and has been an industrial building ever since. The buildings that surround it were built after. In fact, the construction company that operated out of that building built the apartments across the street. It has always been used as a warehouse or light industrial building continuously since 1959 and is still being used by a construction company today. To change the zoning of a building that has been continually used for the purpose it was constructed is wrong, and the law supports what I'm saying. As you can see, this beautiful building there's the construction company. They're inside of there, operating a construction company and have been for the last 6 years. There's an air compressor there. There's the backyard there. There's the side along the property line between the residence and the property there. See it? Okay. Spot zoning is not illegal. In fact, it's difficult to find examples of illegal spot zoning. An example of illegal spot zoning would be if someone were to take a house and zone it as a brothel or a restaurant for their own personal gain at a detriment of the neighborhood and the community. That is not the case in this situation. The building has been in operation consistently since its construction in 1959, and the neighborhood has never been hurt by its existence. In fact, the law protects the building against blanket zoning, such as what's happening in this case. Cities may grant, this is from the law, cities may grant variances for buildings like 415 West Laurel if, by not granting the variance in zoning, it creates an undue hardship for the property in question. The term undue hardship, as used in this subsection, means A, the land in question cannot yield a reasonable return if a variance is not granted, which obviously it can't. You can't convert the building to a residence. Number 2, the need for a variance is due to the unique circumstances of the property and not the general condition of the neighborhood. It's obviously a unique property. And the granting of a variance will not alter the essential character of the locality. And the hardship is not a result of action taken by the applicant or prior owner. The zoning situation is not an action or has nothing to do with us. The buildings existed there longer than most of us. And the community is built around it. It's this exact situation that kind of zoning by law exists. What that basically means is we're not causing the problem. The building has existed longer than any of the buildings without any complaints. No one who actually lives or exists around the building in the real world has any problem with the building at all. It is, in essence, a fictional problem, meaning it needs to be rezoned for some fictional, non-actual meaning. And therefore, the city has no reason to condemn the building with bad zoning. Finally, there's no reason to worry about living in a light, or no reason to worry about leaving in a light industrial building. Residential and commercial have been getting along side by side for years. In fact, it is beneficial to live near a business rather than a residence. My wife and I live across from the convalescent care center, and we love it. Everything is quiet after 5 p.m. I'd much rather live next to a commercial building that is closed after 5 o'clock than live next to the neighbor who throws parties every night. Businesses make good neighbors. In fact, there are many examples of businesses that are operating side by side with residents as we speak. In fact, as you can see, this one here, oh, wait, that's Laurel Avenue. That looks like a new building. That's a light industrial building facing Laurel Avenue. Yeah, oh, look, there are residents next door.
I'm going to need you to wrap up, but I'm pretty sure we all get the picture.
And there's a 15-foot wall between the houses and Laurel. And, as you can see, they get long side by side. It's not a case of zoning. It's a case of good neighbors versus bad. In this particular case, I believe there are some complaints, and those complaints evidently have to do with music, not construction noises. And music is something that is not indicative to businesses. Music is often played by loud, noisy neighbors. Residents can create music.
Thank you, Warren.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Culberson? Who's next? Joe?
I have just a quick question. Warren, that property on square footage, it's not even viable as an R3 if you were to include the parking and to build 3 units. It doesn't even have the footprint to sustain that, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. I'll keep this short. I own property at 414 North O Street, which I purchased some time ago, and it was owned appropriately for the sheet metal type business that I'm in. Any change in that zoning to residential really doesn't make sense to me. It will, it's right next to a gas station. It'll devalue my property, I'm thinking at least 80%. When I bought that property, I was not told that this is going to be zoning change to residential. It's going to be a detriment to me. I don't know why any of this makes sense, so I can draw a red line, and it's not a very good residential area anyway. It's a busy street. It's a gas station next door, another kind of an industrial building next door, and it would be a hardship trying to sell this thing when people know that they're interested in purchasing it. It's going to be zone residential. I don't think any houses would ever be built there in our lifetime. I don't think anybody in the council would like buying their houses and think they're going to live in a residential area and somebody come in and draw a red line and say, oh no, this is industrial or something now, and devaluing their property. So I'm opposed to this. It doesn't seem fair. There's got to be a better way to do this. Thank you.
Joe, when you get the clean closure letter from the county on the old fuel station, was it a commercial clean closure letter or a residential clean closure letter, do you know?
I don't know offhand, but there was a problem with the gas station having some sort of a fuel problem, and it's been addressed for the last 10 or 12 years. I finally got a clean bill of health from the Santa Barbara, the environmental group there, that's saying everything's taken care of. They even had some test wells on my property that they've abandoned because apparently everything's taken care of now. So.
Okay, I guess the reason it's the old bulk station next to it's 414 North O.
Is that, what's the cross street nearby?
Well, there's
Laurel.
a gas station right next door on the corner.
Laurel and O. Yeah, catty corner from Alex's Market. The issue, Joe, and I think you need to check with the county, is you may have a commercial clean closure letter, which is what typically would be issued for that property because it's commercial property back then. Now it's been rezoned to residential now. But if you don't have a residential clean closure letter, then you actually would be barred from building on the property that we rezoned to residential.
Yeah, I've been all through this with, like I say, they've been testing this for...
Got to get into the microphone.
Like I say, they've been testing this thing for over 10 years, and I finally called, and I got, like I say, a letter, but they didn't address whether it was a residential or commercial bill of health. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Come on down, Chuck. I forgot to tell you. Sorry about that. And you have to say your name.
What?
Yeah, you have to say your name.
Oh, say it. I thought you said I'd spell it. Jeez. Charles Justice, 405 and 405 and a half North End. Same basically location that Joe was just talking about in that neighborhood. I understand that I think they said in 2006, that area was rezoned to residential. And I've been in this building that we're talking about since 2009. And I came down to the city at that time trying to get it, actually trying to get a business license there. And they said, you can't, it's not zoned for that. And so I've been kind of trying to figure out what I got to do to get that rezoned back to what it was for all those years. I used to have a place next door in 413 in the 70s that I worked out of as an automotive shop. No problem. Now, whoever changed it, what I'm asking is if we get it changed back so that we could conduct a business there. That's basically all I've got to say is that's what I'm here for.
Chuck, could you describe the building to the council, please? I'm familiar with it, but I'm not sure everybody is.
Well, if you're familiar with the area, we have, I'm going to say Jose's Tire Shop on the corner of Laurel and the Inn. And we have 413 on the opposite side of us. We're in the middle. We're the little shop in the middle at 405, 405 and a half.
And the building is
407 in there.
The building is basically an open span industrial building, right?
Right. Standalone building.
And then you have a fenced yard on the alley and you have some parking out front, all paved.
Right.
Okay.
It's all basically all fenced in. Like they asked us a while back to put a skirting around the fencing to enclose it so it's not basically seen from the outside, and we conform to that. And we haven't had any problem with, us going in and out of there, but we can't run a business, and that's keeping us down.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? Thank you. Who's next?
247 left.
Come on down.
How you doing? My name is Robert Bueno. Actually, what Chuck was talking about, we're trying to get the business going there, but actually, like he was saying, everything's fenced up, and it's just hard to do a business. And we want to do business to keep, the money in the community of Lompoc. But I go and I do jobs, I do body work and stuff, and it's just hard for me, to do it there without, zoning it back where it was, because it used to be industrial. I know I think it's 413 or something, that had old father and grandpa's paint booth in there. And we tried to get that place one time to fix the booth, but we couldn't zone it. So that's where we're at, like Chuck said, and if we could get it open and have business going there, and we have no problems with people, we got parking, we got fenced up everything. It's a good neighborhood, there needs to be more business there open so the community can have money here in Lompoc. Because I usually take my work from here to Santa Maria, and I don't really like leaving my money in Santa Maria. I'd rather leave it here in Lompoc. And I do want to try to establish a business so I can have my own business here in Lompoc. And if we get it zoned, I'd be really happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Who's next?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is James Justice. I'm Chuck's son. We've been in there, like you said, 5 years, and we've been basically doing our own thing there. We've had race cars, and we build race cars, and I fabricate. I've worked on cars since I was 14 years old. The one thing I do see, if possible, if we can get that thing to be changed back to industrial, is I do have a lot of people that do come by there from the station, break down, and they want me to do work on their vehicle and everything, which I can't do because we're not open for business, so I have to turn them somewhere where they have to get their car towed to somebody else or wherever. But it seems to be a good location because there's a lot of traffic that does come through there in that intersection, the gas station. I've had a lot of people break down right there at the gas station needing help. So It would be nice to, if we could get that to be changed to commercial again, with the tire shop being there, and we can have a shop right there in between there. It would help out a lot. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else? Nobody? Okay. So we'll close oral communication. We'll come back to this subject, and we go to a couple more. Maybe we'll open it back up. So let me do a recap of the buildings that were affected by this downzoning. The 6 buildings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buildings in this area, which is the block on O Street and N Street north of Laurel. So on the O Street side, it would be the gas station on the corner, and then Mr. Barto's, and then the building next door, which has been used for various industrial uses over the years. There's an auto repair facility in there now that was there when the zoning changed, so it didn't have to move. And on the other side of the block on the N Street would be the tire shop on the corner, which was open and doing business at the time the zoning changed in 2006. And then the other 2, 3 buildings were vacant at that time, and they continue to be vacant because they don't have a use. The next one would be Mr. Culberson's building between K and L on Laurel Avenue. The next one would be Valley Welding and the shopping center. The shopping center was rezoned from C2 to community convenience. So community convenience is typically a shopping center that's smaller, and let's see, what would a good example be? The little market at I and Cypress would be a good example of that. So it's a freestanding community convenience store. Then that center has, now it's been rezoned community convenience. So a number, now it's fully occupied now, so that's a good thing, but a number of the businesses that had been in that center in the past would not be able to go in there now. And just to make an easy comparison for the council, if you recall Mr. Nolan's used car lot on Ocean Avenue, he was trying to build another building on the site because it's a large site and he wasn't using it all. That one is also zoned community convenience. And when he came in with choice after choice of a business that was looking for a place that he could build a building for, none of those businesses could go into that zone. It's a fairly restrictive zone because it's designed to be for little neighborhood stores. Okay, the next building to the west is Valley Welding, which is an industrial building and was rezoned to C2. So that building and the business has been for sale for a number of years, but because of the zoning, they haven't had much luck selling it, because if the welding shop went out, it would need to be converted to a retail store. So in today's market, probably the most likely thing it could turn into would be a winery with a tasting room, and it's actually about the right size and about the right configuration. But because it's in C2, it couldn't be that. It would need to be put back to its former industrial. And then the next building to the west has been, let's see, it was a cabinet shop, it was the Moose Lodge, it was a church, and again, that one was also made community convenience. So it has very limited uses, and currently about the only thing they've been able to get into there was a church. And the last one, and kind of the prom star for all of this, is the J.B. Dewar fueling station down at V and Laurel next to the city yard. And that was rezoned 7R1 to be a residence. And that was, again, what I was talking to Mr. Bartow about, because to use a property that had fuel on it and had a spill, which every facility of the size of this one has had some leakage over the years, it's very difficult to get back to a clean closure letter for residential. It's easier to get back to a clean closure letter for commercial. So if that fueling station were ever to relocate, that parcel would become basically useless. And unfortunately, they're clear up in San Luis, so they weren't able to join us this evening. So these are the parcels that have a lot of problems. And in the case of a number of them, they've been vacant. Some or all of the buildings have been vacant since 2006. Now, I'd like you to imagine that you own a building that you can't put a tenant in, and you're making the payments and the taxes and the insurance, but you can't have the building occupied by a real tenant. You can get someone in there to have their little home hobby shop, but that's not going to pay the kind of rent that a commercial business would pay. So, when we were working on the general plan, we said, we'll work on you guys. And then we realized that we couldn't do it with the general plan phase one. And when we finished general plan phase one, we said, well, we'll work on you guys when we get done with phase one, and we'll have a meeting and we'll discuss it. And I think the first time we scheduled this meeting was July of 2012 to discuss this issue with these particular properties. Then we said, well, it'll probably be in about August of 2013, and now we're in March of 2014. I don't really think it's fair to require these people to wait another year, because it would be more convenient for us to solve their problems when we make our other general plan corrections. And the other side that I am now hearing is, well, we should probably do these after we do the zoning update. So now we're out somewhere around 2016. Basically, the value of these properties was stolen from these people. And we haven't done anything to fix it. It's now time to do that. There are some other things on the list that I put on, and they have to do with the Bailey Corridor, and I've now finally gotten through all the environmental review, and at this point I don't have any desire to proceed with any of those. I want to talk about a couple of issues with them just so that I can get some consensus for the council, but it's not something I really want to work on today. The two things I feel we need to work on that I turned in are, number one, changing the name of the mixed-use zone, because that has prevented people from getting loans to be able to sell their property. We don't need to change the ordinance, we only need to change the name, because it seems to be the kiss of death for getting a loan. And I think we need to fix this. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Ms. Reeves, I do have a question for you. For those tenants who are currently in these parcels, such as the public that came to speak this evening, would they be then, are they given the legal non-conforming use?
Where there's an existing business in one of the buildings, yes, they may continue to operate, and they are legal non-conforming. For any of the property owners who want to have a business go into one of the buildings, they can approach the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit, which would allow operation of a business of that type in that particular building.
And so it sounds like there may have been some challenges with that in the past. Can you address why these concerns are being brought forward? I mean, is it simply a property value issue? Because, I mean, if we have avenues for them to use it either as legal non-conforming or under conditional use permit, is it really just property value that we're talking about, where people feel like if I were to sell my property, I want to get the top dollar, and because you changed the zoning, I'm no longer going to get that?
I couldn't really speak to what the property owner's thought was, but we do have the avenue for them to utilize their property.
So, Mayor Lynn, you know, I know that there are some struggles here. I know that there is some challenges that I've been communicated on multiple occasions, so it sounds like this is an issue. But can you, based on your experience, what's the feedback that you've received from the property owners?
Well, I think it's exactly what Chuck said. They've come in to get a business license and been told no. And you can't issue a conditional use permit when the use isn't in the zoning. And you're not going to get a conditional use permit to operate an automotive business in a building that's in the zone residential. I mean, it isn't a conditional use, it's a non-use. You just can't do it. Now, I'm sure there may be some convoluted process where they can get some use out of their building, but is it really their responsibility to have to go through our convoluted process to simply open a business in a building that was designed and purpose-built for that, and really has a negative value as for residential, because the first thing you got to do is pay for the cost of tearing it down before you pay for the cost of building a new building. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I guess that understanding that that is a challenge for these property owners and understanding that we need to figure out what that is, how do we deal with this? The challenge becomes what percentage of these buildings, right, we're passing this general plan because it is this very important document for the entire community. So what percentage of these certain parcels outweighs the rest of the community being in proper zoning? Does that make sense? So that's the struggle that I'm having. We need to finish this process because it is a guiding document. But I understand that we need to address this issue as well. I'm just trying to decide if that should really derail us from passing the general plan.
I can't figure out why we're incapable of doing two things at one time. And, if we all sat here and agreed that on September 24th, we were going to be done with phase 2, and without exception, all 5 of us agreed that on September 24th, we would begin to solve these people's problems, you could probably talk me into it. But twice before, we've said we're going to solve your problem on a date certain, and the date certain passed, and now what's 6 off of 2014? 8 years later, their problem is unresolved, and it's not fair. How would you like to have your property made useless for 8 years? It's simply...
I understand the challenge, but obviously an additional environmental review is required because you do have 2 adjacent uses that are not the same use. If you're trying to have residential directly adjacent to commercial, Mr. Culberson, I'm glad you brought it up. They're at the Planning Commission right now with the complaint and they're not a 9 to 5. They go until 9 o'clock at night. So there is a challenge with making sure that these uses that are directly adjacent can coexist in a very cohesive way. So that's why I think additional environmental review is required. But Ms. Breeze, I think it's important to address, I do think this is an issue, and we have addressed this in the past, and I'm wondering, what has kind of kicked the can down the road so far? Is it just been the workload, or what's caused us to not take this on? Is it the environmental review portion? What is it exactly?
Well, we did look at the zoning consistency. This came out of the zoning consistency that was done with the 1997 general plan when we were attempting to make the zoning map and the land use map consistent. The fact that these parcels were identified in the 1997 general plan update as parcels that if you were looking at an area, the GPAC looked at it not as the use that was on the property at the time, but if there were nothing on the property, what they would want to see on it in the future. That's how these properties were viewed. All what we were trying to do was to make sure that there was consistency between the 2 maps as we are legally required to do.
Thank you.
And, one thing I would also point out, and we dealt with this at the end of the process, but that same, if it was a blank piece of property, what would I do, is how those 250 residential parcels came to be downzoned that we in the end did not downzone. However, this decision back in 2006 was made under a different set of circumstances. I'm not sure which one, Councilmember Holmdahl.
Yeah, one of the questions I have, I'm very pleased what I heard tonight. Well, no, I'm not. Is that we've taken so long to get there. Has any of this, everything that John has down on all these properties, has the Planning Commission seen all those as a unit itself and come back with any recommendation to the council? Has it ever been segregated out of these parcels that the Planning Commission itself look at it and come back with a recommendation to the council?
The Planning Commission reviewed all of the zoning consistency maps. They did look at those parcels and make a recommendation forward to the council that the 2 maps be made consistent.
And I'm trying to get the 2 of them together, but in that same process, they haven't looked at these because of what was discussion we hear tonight, is these are in more of a commercial or industrial or whatever type of building they were, and they can't be used. and they can't do that. We got a residential community on top of them. And I think that somehow that, I have the feeling that we should be able to do some changes, but I'd like to have the recommendation just on these come back from the camp in the process as we start the rest of it. Because it reminds me of what's happening is what happened in Board of Supervisors just this last couple of weeks, where the building was built in 1800 as a residence. Now the County Board of Supervisors kicked them out. And they've been there since 1800 as a resident. These buildings have been there as long as I've been in town. And if they've been an industrial or commercial building, whatever they should still have that. And so we need to find a way to get that changed. But I think I'd rather have a recommendation come to the council from the planning commission of which way they should go. And then we could make it.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Breeze, you're on the hot spot all night tonight, I think. I think we all have understandings and sympathy for the property owners here. And if we had a magic wand, we'd like to resolve all the problems right now. Councilmember Costa had a really good point. We have to have a broader view of the general plan, the entire community. Now, the mayor had mentioned that if we were to agree that on September 24th, we were going to address these issues. Is that even a possibility that in the middle of September, the end of September, we could, after passing phase 2, we could dedicate ourselves to addressing these properties? Is that even a possibility?
If the council directs that we take those particular parcels to the planning commission again, we could certainly do that.
See, because I'm concerned about just continually delaying this general plan. It's been 7 years right now. It's going on 8 years. I understand the property owners are waiting just as long. So if we could do this together, get through the general plan, after phase 2, really wholeheartedly say we are going to address these properties. Now, addressing these properties, maybe everyone isn't going to be happy. I don't know. At least we'd get a final resolution for you. So that's where I'd like to see us go, is getting through phase 2 tonight. Or not tonight, but getting through phase 2, directing the staff to continue with the schedule we're on through September of this year.
Turn. Third. Okay. He's thinking, Councilmember Costa, so you're up.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ms. Breeze, I think Councilmember Lingle brought up a good point, but I do have a question, which is that, if these parcels are brought back to the Planning Commission, that I don't know each neighborhood. My assumption is it wouldn't be an issue with the neighbors, but the surrounding neighbors would be notified, and then there would be discussion as regard to the compatibility of the use. Is that right? Or are we going the cart before the horse? Sorry to interrupt you before you even were able to answer that question. Because I'm wondering, you've told us before about the issue of spot zoning. Would your recommendation be to do a zoning overlay for those particular pieces of property, or is that something that would develop at the Planning Commission?
We would look at the property on Laurel has been reviewed by the Planning Commission a number of times, and the other properties have not specifically, they've been looked at as part of the project. We would have to do noticing, we'd have to do analysis of the zone change. There are certain steps that you have to take for a zone change, but that's what we would proceed with following the phase 2, if that's the council direction, on those specific properties that were identified.
Okay, and Marilyn, I don't want us to take away from this topic necessarily, but I just had a quick question about your, suggestion number 9? We got an email from a community member that pointed out rezone of Bella's house on H Street to residential ag. Is that something that was that a misprint? Is that supposed to be on A Street?
Yeah, A Street.
A Street. So I just want to clarify for the public that this report should be A Street instead of H Street. Thank you.
Joe would be pretty excited at his house move when he was out of town, wouldn't he? Councilmember Lingle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Breeze, Mr. City Attorney, tonight was mentioned spot zoning. I've always been of the understanding that spot zoning is illegal. Tonight, Mr. Culbertson indicated, and he gave us some quotes where, in cases, it is legal. Is spot zoning legal? In some cases, is it legal? Please clarify that for me.
For the City Attorney.
I guess it all depends on your perspective of what constitutes spot zoning. But spot zoning is illegal. The concept of spot zoning is you can't have one or two parcels that are zoned differently than the surrounding parcels unless there's a really, really good reason that, from a land use perspective, that they're zoned differently. Because if you do that, it calls into question the reasonable basis, which is what you have to zone in the first place, for zoning the other properties differently. So the quick answer is yes, spot zoning is illegal.
So just to kind of put a couple of those things in perspective, the group of industrial buildings on Laurel and N, there are 7 parcels there. Several of the parcels are quite large, so it's greater than 2/3 of a city block. The J.B. Dewar fuel station, although it would be differently zoned than the city yard directly across the street, the uses were very similar. They're vehicle facilities. So although one was public facility, if it were not a public facility, it would need to have the same zoning to do what it does. And, you know, kind of catty corner across the street is the new industrial building on the back of the old Lompoc lumber where the several wineries and the gym are. And then with regard to the group of properties beginning with the Lock and Cheetah Center and all through there, they had C2 was their primary zoning, and then 2 of them were industrial, and they were downzoned to community convenience, and the one industrial building was downzoned to C2. So they're not the only property here that's kind of freestanding is Mr. Culberson's. All the rest of them are in clusters or next to similar parcels. Councilmember Starbuck.
Thank you, Mayor. So let's take the Culberson property. We know that they have a very small lot. I know that it's not, the footprint for R3 is not developable there. When you include the parking and the requirements, you say, well, okay, go ahead and they could do R2 or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Their property has been devalued from an industrial to an R3, which is, there's no profit in the R3 that they could build there. So in this case, that would be a justifiable spot zoning, true? None of the other ordinances we have would work for them for R3. There's nothing but to make them a spot zoned industrial, light industrial.
For a city determination to be found to be an inverse condemnation, meaning an act that takes away a property owner's right completely, there's a whole set of facts and circumstances that are considered. One of the circumstances is that the property is left with no economic use. That's a very high standard that a property owner has to show because it has to be no economic use. So if there's a reasonable economic use that property can be used for based on the zoning the city gives it, even if that value is less than what the property owner paid for the property, I'm not talking about whether you agree from a fairness perspective or whether you agree from an ethical perspective. I'm just saying the state of the law is that as long as the city leaves a property owner with some reasonably economic use of a piece of property, a property owner doesn't have a right to all of the value that they may have paid for the property.
I'm going to ask somebody else. That's not the right answer. Let me do a comparison here. We have gone through the south side in our previous conversations with zoning, and we went ahead and, I'm going to say, for lack of a better term, spot zoned many areas in the south side. We've done it by the justification of the term overlay. We've made a special overlay for properties in the south side so that they could reestablish their residential value, R2s back to R3s, R1s to R2s, et cetera, et cetera. Why can't we do the same damn thing with an industrial overlay in there with these buildings as they are existing?
I'm not saying we can't, but remember, we did a significant amount of analysis, almost parcel by parcel, on that south side before you had both your legal analysis and your land use analysis say, yeah, we can do that. So
do we follow the same path?
It's possible. I don't know. I'm not going to say tonight that yes, we can, or no, we can't. What I'm going to say is there's a possibility, but that analysis has to be done.
I'd like to look down that path. I don't want everybody to wait, but I don't want to stop these elements in phase 2. So I'm very inclined to continue moving with phase 2 as I seek a solution for this industrial mess.
If I may interject, I know this isn't going to sound too helpful, but there is a process that property owners can always submit an application to the city to rezone their property, to redesignate their property. The issue then is they have to pay for all of that process. So I'm not suggesting that that's something they want to do, but there is a process that a property owner can use.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't pay to get downzoned though, so I mean, we're just going in a bad circle for them.
So, Joe, you feel strongly both ways? You feel strongly both ways? Okay, and I just, on the spot zoning, I want to point out a couple other things around town, just so we don't all think that this is the only place out there. So normally I wouldn't be able to talk about this because it's within 500 feet of a property I own, but I think this is just as an example, so you're going to let me, right? Within 500 feet of a property I own is an industrial park. Within that industrial park is one parcel that's zoned BP. A little further down on the other end of that industrial park is one parcel that's zoned BP. Now, obviously, BP and industrial are fairly similar, but if you want to call them spot zoning, they are surely little parcels left out there whose value was substantially reduced because they were zoned that way. And on both of those parcels, they are currently behaving like the industrial parcels next door to them, which is certainly violating some of our many rules. So we have caused them to have a property that's harder to use, and in fact the tenants that are in at least one of those locations probably couldn't quite be there. Almost, but not quite. So this is not a unique problem, and that one needs to be addressed when we get around to it. But this is the worst of the worst. So I guess what I want to ask you guys is if you all want to swear to all of these people in the audience and pass it tonight that on or about September 24th, prior to beginning work on our zoning update, we will work on this to help these people straighten out the problem that was created for them by the city of Lompoc.
Call on Dirk.
Call on Dirk.
I guess that before I go swearing to a bunch of people that know where I live and stuff, I'd like to maybe talk to staff about what path do we want to go down here that doesn't interfere with the elements in phase 2. Is the industrial overlay a way that we're going to look at doing this? Are we going to look at rezoning Laurel Avenue again? Or what is your interpretation of what we're going to do before we raise our fingers and say, oh, we do?
If the council appears, if we want to move forward with the schedule that was presented this evening by the Planning Commission that shows the actual phase 2 elements coming to the council in September of 2014, then that would be a request that we would ask the council to provide that direction. If, once that is completed, you want to look at the zoning of those specific parcels prior to us going forward with the zoning ordinance update, we could do that, or we could also move forward with the zoning ordinance update and look at these parcels as part of that.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir?
I would be concerned if we tonight say the ones we're only going to look at by the September 24th date, whether we do it part of the zoning amendment or by itself, is the specific parcel we're talking about now, because I don't know, as I sit here, there may be other people in exactly the same position as the people that are talking tonight, and when will it, how big of that is that picture going to be?
I think I could walk back to my office and get you the list and draw you a really good picture in vivid colors. But suffice it to say, of the ones that I am aware of, it is the parcels that I have outlined this evening and those two business park parcels that are kind of floating out there by themselves, and also the Planning Commission's decision to, with regard to the new industrial park, to make the front 300 feet, and this is something they've already said, so I'm not speaking out of school, the front 300 feet business park and the rear portion of it industrial. So I guess I hear what you're saying, so maybe the way I would phrase it was that we will look at these parcels on that date and any others with similar issues. Would that make your conscience feel better? I've been trying to fix this for a couple, 3 years.
The window's either going to be this big, or this big opening. So you just, my job is to make sure that when I have a concern that comes to my mind, that I share it with you. So when you make a decision, you make a fully informed decision. I feel like I accomplished that. Not helpful, but I accomplished that.
Sharing is caring. Who's next?
I think Bob was.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fink, I'd like you to come up here and give us your opinion on how this can affect the Planning Commission if we went this route.
Okay, so let me get this straight. What you want to do,
Considering
the idea is to go and complete Phase 2 by September 24th.
Give or take.
And we should be able to do that if we don't get any big hand grenades thrown at us. We'll be okay. And then take up the issue of addressing these properties that you've identified here. There's probably a dozen or so of them, right, or thereabouts. And Lucille has said that we could address those properties in parallel with doing the zoning code update, correct, Lucille? Yeah, okay. So from my perspective as a planning commissioner, I believe that we could move along that path. If Lucille says we can do it, we can do it. I mean, we've had meetings that lasted 5, 6, 7 hours, and as you know, Councilmember Lingle, when you were with us, we had several large projects at the same time in the same meeting. We'd be there for hours talking about them. So, yeah, we can. We're multitaskers. We can do two things at once.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Thank you.
Which one of you is next?
Yeah, well, I was going to bring that. I'm glad to hear that, because that's what the direction I was going to go, try and get Phase 2 done, but it's somehow in the process, the Planning Commission can be looking at some of these properties. I don't know how you want to lay it out in there, but I think it's definitely needs to be done. So if we maybe halfway started when the September 24th date is over, but I want to get Phase 2 done. We had other problems years ago that every time we started work on the general plan, somebody would bring something else in, and that cost us 6, 8 months to a year, and I don't want to happen again. That's why I want Phase 2 done. But somehow in the process, these Planning Commission can at times look at some of these, maybe take one set at a time or however, and then have a recommendation after the 24th of September.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ms. Rees, I just want to clarify, though, because there's additional analysis that would be required and review that would be required, when we talk about September 24th as, well, after September 23rd, really, so it could be the end of September or I'm assuming early October, that would just be an initial meeting at the Planning Commission to sort of initiate the review process?
We would have to begin work on it at that point. There would be staff work that would need to be done, so it would not be coming back to the council in September. We would still be working on with the Planning Commission and the council to complete the general plan. Once that was completed, then we could begin the review of these projects or this zone change for these parcels. And then at the same time, we could be looking at starting the zoning ordinance update.
So I just want, we're talking about September, but that's when staff work would start on this. And I don't know how long that would take to then come back to the Planning Commission and then come back to council. So, this is still quite a ways away. And I just want to be clear that the analysis could come back. We could address this concern, but the analysis could come back either way. I mean, you could have land use policy that just says, no, absolutely not. This parcel should be zoned X and you want it to be zoned Y. So I just, I think that it should be addressed, absolutely. But I just want to be clear that this isn't, we're going to solve your problem necessarily, and it's going to happen in September. I just want to be very clear about that. Thank you.
I think what I'm looking for is that we are going to have a starting point and that it's next in the queue. We may be looking at the rest of the zoning ordinance simultaneously, but this is going to be finished first. It's not going to wait until way down the road. City Administrator.
And thank you for both of those two most recent comments in particular, because it really, I think, addressed what my comments were. I wanted to give a couple of cautionary notes, not to discourage the process going forward and going forward aggressively, but just as the caveat. For instance, we are focusing on the September 14th time period as having the certification of the Phase 2 elements, and that assumes that we have some fairly clear sailing on the EIR components of this. I think that's probably what Mr. Fink was referring to when he suggested, as long as we don't have hand grenades. I think what he was talking about were the environmental hand grenades that might be there. We're not anticipating that. I'm not seeing that as a problem, but I think we also need to be careful that the EIR process deserves its due process and due hearing, and that we make our decisions based upon the outcome of that without, totally anticipating that. So that was just one. It's more meant as a reality check. I still think our best intentions are to proceed on the timeline we're talking about, but we do have this element that is a little beyond all of our collective and exclusive control. And then the point that you made, that then again, we don't want to deprive the due process, and therefore we can't anticipate what the outcomes come at that point, but we can anticipate where our priorities are and the efforts and energy we put in. I just wanted to clarify those points. Thanks.
To that point, Mr. Dalton, do you anticipate any large hand grenades with your environmental work on Phase 2? Or have you already received those in Phase 1 and now you're just picking up the fragments?
Well, to the extent that Phase 1 deals with physical changes from the land use element and the circulation element, that is where you would expect to receive most of the public comment on environmental impacts. With the Phase 2 elements, we're talking about elements that are essentially mitigative in nature. So there's maybe a little bit less to debate in terms of what the physical environmental impacts are. So no, I don't anticipate major grenades.
Okay. That's for just the little ones, right? Okay. Okay. So it seems to me that we're all pretty well agreed on this, yes? Mm-hmm. All right. So let me see if I can put together a motion. So Lucille, you're going to help me here a little bit. So we're going to approve the amendments 3 and 4. We're going to approve the schedule, subject to change as necessary. What else are we going to approve that I haven't gotten yet before I get to this last part?
Wait, what are 3 and 4?
The financial.
Okay.
Yeah.
The economic development element and the housing element, contract amendments.
Thank you.
And what else? I got those. Is there any?
Yeah, I would just recommend that we include my comments, which can be done with the Planning Commission, and it would not inhibit their ability to complete phase 2 in a timely manner.
Let me come back to that in a second, because we need to get the rest of the council to weigh in on that. Let me try to get what we've got, and then I'll come back to that if that's okay with you. Is there anything else? Any other wraparound in this? No? Yes?
Say that one more time, Mayor Lynn.
So at this point, we're going to approve the funding for the economic development element number 3 and the housing element update number 4. We're going to approve the schedule, and we're going to specify that at the conclusion of the phase 1, we will begin review of these, phase 2, we will begin review of the properties that we have discussed this evening and any other properties with similar problems.
And not just the funding, but the authorize the agreements for the
agreement and the funding, yes.
I guess I would like my amendments to be part of that motion.
Couldn't we just finish this and come back to that?
Not for me, no. I would like to have them as one motion. I don't really see, they're more small cleanup details.
We haven't discussed them yet, and I want to have oral communication back to do that. Because we only focused on this one subject, so I'm willing to throw the whole thing over to the side and start over and come to yours, but if I could get one motion done, and I'm not trying to sideline you, I don't disagree with you, but we haven't discussed it, nor we asked the public for comment.
We had public comment on the item already. Did we fulfill the mandate?
I understand that.
I don't mind opening it up again, but
I'd like to open it up again with regard to one of your items and one of my items, which are more verbiage in nature. Can you live with that?
Okay.
Okay. City Clerk, did I make it clear enough? Okay. Is there any other discussion on that? Councilmember Costa, you have? Okay. Could we vote on that, please? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Back up. Who's going to second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, now discussion.
Now discussion.
Okay, so explain to me why you don't want to include Councilmember Costa's
I do.
comment.
I just want to come back and get that separately.
Well, how can we vote on it then?
We can vote on this twice. We can have 2 votes on 2 pieces.
I don't understand. Why do we?
Because I want to start another whole discussion on her item and my item, and I don't really want to mix them in with this. Can we just finish this, and then we'll come over to that?
But your Councilmember Costa's comments are concerning the motion you just made.
No, I think they're concerning some language that she wants the Planning Commission to go to work on, and I have some language I'd like them to go to work on.
yes. However, as staff mentioned, these are small minor things that can be done concurrently with completing phase 2. So it's just my recommendation to include these in process with phase 2.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. I'd just like to do it separately, again, with my item and your 3 items. Humor me a little. I'm not trying to cut anybody off from anything. Just trying to, you know how I like to compartmentalize things, put one thing away, put one toy away before we take out the next one. Okay? All right.
So just for clarification.
Yes.
We're moving forward with phase 2.
Correct.
After completion of phase 2,
we will take these properties and any other properties with a similar issue next.
in conjunction with the zoning update.
Conjunction with, but ahead of. In other words, they will not wait until the end of the zoning update, whenever that has to happen.
Well, Yeah, they're going to be handled in conjunction with each other, so.
Correct. Okay. But they're not going to wait for the other one to end before something happens to them.
And so,
City attorney, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah, city
I appreciate the promotion. Just for my clarification then, your motion amongst what you're adding are inclusive of staff's recommendations of number 1, 2, 3, and 4, is that correct?
That's true, but then they're going to discuss something and add some more to that.
Yeah.
I just hadn't heard him cover certain portions, what I was reading here in 1 through 4, so I wanted to make sure your enhancements to staff's recommendations included staff's recommendations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And is there any other discussion? Seeing none, can we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. And we're going to take a 5-minute break because I just ran out of ink. And it's time for a quick break. Okay, Councilmember Costa, you want to cover your items?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Lynn. The recommendations that I made were more in a cleanup sense. A lot of the language was already added during the update process, and there was just a few minor gaps where I implemented just some language suggestions that then the Planning Commission can review. If they absolutely think it's a terrible idea, I'm sure we'll hear about it, but I think that they're relatively minor in nature.
You want to recap them for everybody, please?
Sure, you can find them, I believe they are on page 4 of 8 through 5 of 8. You can see Council Member Costa's proposals. There are 4 total, I believe.
So the first 2, it looks like they got those already.
Correct. Yeah, so these other things would just be under review and recommendation without additional environmental review.
So it'd be 3 and 4, correct?
2.
No, I think they got 2 because it has the other.
No, the language to include walkability and bikeability wasn't included. They talked about improving public health, but didn't specify walkability and bikeability.
I stand corrected.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, number 3 and 4. So yes, you're correct, not 1, but just 2, 3, and 4.
Whichever one of you is first.
So, Ms. Breeze, on these, I believe you say that there'd be, as we described in our opening background, we said make minor changes, modifications. So these are, would you consider these minor modifications and they will not delay phase 2?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then in number 1, I want to just discuss number 1. Is the change already made to require from encourage? Because that's what I thought, but then reading it, I'm not sure that we've actually made that change yet. Is there a change in there right now that says require?
Yes, it was completed in the final version of the land use element. If you look in your final version, the word require is there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with regard to the substance of these 3, does anyone have a comment? Oh, the other guy.
I just real quick wanted to put something out here, and I want us to think about it for a second, is when we use the word require over encourage, it takes me back to months and months of shall, should. And I'm just wondering, is when we put the word require in here, then it becomes absolutely a mandatory thing, just like shall did in so many other things that went changed to should. Is that the intent of the language here?
No, I think you're looking at 3 and 4. 3 and 4.
Yeah.
That's okay, I have it here.
Three, yes.
Yeah, so that is my intent.
Councilmember Homdahl.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, require and such, these will be going before the planning commission with that in there, right? So the public has a right to make a comment if they want to be required to do something. When you start requiring, you're starting to mandate, and that's, some people get sick and tired of government mandating anything on them too. So as long as they're going to have a chance to make their comments known, and it should be highlighted that it's required.
Okay, just, Mr. Dalton, could you give me an example of what someone would do if they were required to have walkable commercial areas beyond what we already do, which is have nice sidewalks?
Right, I think it would be physical improvements, sidewalks, entryways, connections to, pedestrian connections to adjacent properties.
So if they were doing a project to improve a parcel, then this would come into play?
Correct.
Okay. And just to kind of wrap my brain around it, if I were improving a building, if I talked about the 100 block of West Ocean, are you familiar enough with that we wouldn't be speaking Greek to each other?
In general.
Okay, so that area has an improved sidewalk that extends for the length of the block. Is there something that you would envision that someone would need to improve where there was an existing good sidewalk that extended from their parcel to all the other parcels?
You know, I think unless you wanted to provide more specific language about specific facilities that you intend by this language, it would be a matter of interpretation as to whether that's satisfied.
I guess what I'm looking for is that by virtue of saying this, we're not imposing some burden we haven't even considered. It doesn't appear that way to me, by the way. I don't know what walkable commercial areas are other than having a good sidewalk.
I would think that's primarily what's intended.
Okay, and with the same question, bikeable community facilities, you mean you got a place you can ride your bike up and you got a place to lock it up? Is that kind of what a bikeable community facility would be in your estimation?
I would think, and also, you know, if you have it's on a designated bike route, making those improvements as the parcel's developed.
Okay. Yeah, those seem reasonable. Reasonable?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, we wouldn't have a lot of commercial properties that would have a lot of issues with that, but I think as our community develops, there are a lot of, beyond just sidewalks, there are more tools, I guess, so to speak, or instruments that are being utilized on commercial properties to support and promote walkability and bikeability. So, for example, when you're looking at commercial space and you have the discussion of whether the parking lot should go in front of the building or behind, a walkable business is one who has a parking lot behind or to the side, right, rather than this huge expansive parking lot where it's not a very walkable place to walk from the sidewalk to the middle of a shopping center, because that's all parking lot and all vehicle supported space, not pedestrian supported space. So what you're seeing then is when you do have large commercial spaces where the parking lot is up front, there are walkable specific areas or paths that would take you from the sidewalk to the commercial space. And it's actually a very smart business move to do that, as the research is starting to show. So that's just one example of different ways to think about it. It's not just necessarily sidewalk. A lot of times it can be additional instruments as well. So because it is up for interpretation, I mean, you know, if somebody's reasonable I think that that's what we'd be looking for, or if they say, hey, look, there's this option and this option, and we feel that it satisfies, versus someone who takes no account of walkability and bikeability into the development. I think that that's what I'm trying to impart here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. You want to bite of the apple, Ron?
Provide you with a recent example. Your council waived a sidewalk requirement for a facility on North 3rd Street. And so if you're going to require walkability, you wouldn't have the capability of waiving that requirement. And with respect to parking lots, commercial enterprises like to have their parking lots out front because it gives the appearance that the business is active and open for business. So, you know, there's downsides and upsides to it. Walkability is important to our health. On the other hand, your council waived a walkability requirement in a neighborhood for a specific function. Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Dalton. So based on Councilmember Costa's comment, we have a shopping center in town, which is a large shopping center and has the parking out front. And one building in the shopping center is going to be torn down and remodeled, and something new is going into that particular space within the large shopping center. What would you envision? And there's no connectivity between the shopping center and the street, because I think the only one that has that, and just kind of running my brain around town, is Albertsons. The Albertsons Center has a sidewalk up the center. The others enter in from the ends. What would that developer need to do to that shopping center to meet this requirement if they were changing out a building?
Well, you know, keep in mind we're talking about, you know, broad general plan policy statements, not specific zoning requirements. That's why I say there's a matter of interpretation here. So I would say to be determined to be consistent with a policy of this nature, there'd have to be some sort of demonstration. It wouldn't necessarily need to be a design with regard to the placement of structures compared to parking lots, or necessarily a specific kind of sidewalk being provided. It could be a sidewalk connection in through the parcel to the use. To me, this is more of a broad statement of community values, that these are important features to be considered. And so that some form of walkable or bikeable facility would need to be demonstrated to be consistent.
Okay, and I think maybe the Planning Commission you guys could kind of work on this language a little bit so that I'm sorry, Lucille?
I'd just like to note that when we do the zoning ordinance, the implementation of the general plan, the H Street corridor, which is going to address the shopping centers along H Street, those design guidelines are going to refine these policies. That will go through the Planning Commission for review and then come to the council.
Councilmember Costa, do you have a question?
No, Marilyn, I wanted to reiterate, I think that was a really great clarification there, that really we're just talking about a broad statement of community values as the general plan is. And so, you know, those further details can be discussed with, at a future date when we go over those zoning maps.
I guess from my standpoint, if this was something that was going to tip us over the edge and require shopping centers to change, knowing the ages of the various shopping centers and the recent remodels, then I probably wouldn't be very supportive of this. On the other hand, I'm supportive of the concept. So I think maybe what the Planning Commission would do, Councilman Costa, it's not your intent that this is the exact language the Planning Commission is going to adopt. Your intent is they're going to look at this and come back with recommendations, right?
Well, I think that, yeah, I think the language for the general plan I would like to be similar. When we talk about the zoning maps, that's something that will be determined later down the road. I mean, you know, as was said, this will, you know, take place in a public hearing where you can have community input and you can have the Planning Commission discuss this, and then it can come back to council as well. So, but ultimately, being that it is sort of a broad general statement, of some ideals that remain on this council currently, I think that it's an appropriate use of language, but, you know, that can be developed, I suppose, at the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'm happy to advance the concept to them. I would be uncomfortable telling them this is what it's going to say, because I can't begin to think of all the alternatives on this, and frankly, just this discussion has kind of broadened my outlook on it. So if your motion is that we ask them to review this and come back with suitable language, I'm good with that. If your motion is that this is exactly what the language is going to be, then I probably have to do a little more research and a lot more thinking. But I think your intent is that they're moving this direction, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever told the Planning Commission specifically what they've ever had to say. So this is just council taking my recommendations, bringing them to Planning Commission, so more public comment and discussion can be had.
Great. I think that's great. Okay, and then the last one would be my request, which is for the Planning Commission to come up with some other name for mixed use. And apparently from what I've talked to the folks in the lending industry, it almost doesn't matter what it says as long as it doesn't say that. So I don't have any preconceived notion. All the suggestions I gave Ms. Breeze, she laughed at, so we can't use any of mine. Well, they were funny, okay? Yeah. So if you'd like to formulate a motion for yours and mine, that would be great.
And so, Mayor Lynn, again, so my question about your recommendation is, again, the idea that the Planning Commission then develop
a name change,
a suitable name change. And they may recommend that we don't change it at all. That's an option, I'm assuming.
Sure, come on down some more.
Once again, speaking from experience, it looks real simple, just change the name mixed use, but it'll cost us money to update the maps and to change documents. The other thing is mixed use best describes what can be built in this zone. Mixed use means you can have commercial on the bottom floor and residential on the top, and it's a common term throughout the industry. And as far as I know, at least in the time I've been on the Planning Commission, we haven't really had any complaints from developers about this at all. No one's come to us and said, oh, gee, if you would just change it from mixed use to something else, we might build here. No, they come to us with a plan that fits the mixed use zone. So, you know, we'll look at it, we'll take a look at it, and we'll see if we can come up with something, but I wouldn't think that you'd really want to take the term mixed use out of the title, whatever it turns out to be. Just my thinking from my time.
I'll share my thought, but I think Mr. Gonzalez, who's in the loan business, might have something he'd like to share with us.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. I'm a mortgage broker. I have dealt heavily in the commercial, and I'd gladly bring you in a matrix of several trade magazines that'll show the very limited ability to obtain financing for mixed use. The other item is you can have all the uses of mixed use and just put it in another category or a subcategory, but the term does have a negative connotation in the lending, and there's restrictions based on floor areas. So,
Mr. Gonzalez, would you be willing to provide that to Ms. Breeze by any chance?
Sure, I can.
And you can email it to us too. I'd love to see that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Nick, for the loans to be provided if you have something other than mixed use, aren't the lenders smart enough to realize that this is really mixed use?
Again, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other name is still a rose.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's the label mixed use. You'll see that when.
But if they're not familiar with, we're going to call it trapezoid.
It's how you define the mixed use, but right now in that will vary. So again, depending on how that mixed use is defined is what's going to put the prohibitions on it. But mixed use is the red flag that causes the lender to stop and evaluate further.
Then why do just question? All of our surrounding communities use mixed use. Why aren't they up in arms about it? Santa Barbara, Santa Maria. Carpinteria. They all use-
Why aren't,
They
do
use
you,
mixed
do you
use.
know that they don't have problems?
Well, they use it. They're not changing.
How many mixed-use projects have we built since the inception of the zoning?
Have we built?
Yes, in Lompoc.
I have no idea.
So that should be an indicator that there's some difficulty there.
To date, we have not built a single project in the mixed-use zone. And this, I'm sorry, go ahead and then I'll come back to it.
No, Marilyn, I think that, my concern was, I don't want to get rid of the concept, right?
Yeah,
I think the
you're right.
concept in theory is great, but if it's a small minor change, I mean, I do think cost is a good question to ask. Just like when we changed the Christmas children's season holiday Christmas parade. There was cost associated with that maybe I hadn't considered, ill on my part. So I'm thinking of that, right, example of, okay, there will be some costs associated, but then again, when I weigh that out, if we even get one project then to move forward, it was probably worth it. So I do think it's worth the Planning Commission at least considering and discussing further. And maybe we can reach out to the cities in the meantime and see how it has worked for them, or maybe how their definition is different from our definition.
Well, and you need to consider, this is an important difference between, if you were comparing us to Santa Maria, then there's a valid comparison, but if you compare us to Santa Barbara, one of the things that drives a mixed use forward, pretty much no matter what it is extremely high land value and extremely low building value. So you have an old building on very valuable land, and it's going to get torn down and something new is going to go up, and it almost doesn't matter what it's called. But in our case, where you have fairly low land values, and the building is generally more of the value than the land. So in 2005, the mixed use zone was created within the city. And frankly, the zoning ordinance has a few issues in it. But from what people I've talked to that have had properties there, they absolutely positively can't get something financed. What's the guy's name that he did the Pebble Walk? He's a contractor. He was in the 100 block of South G Street, or North G Street. He's the first one that brought it up to me clear back in like 2009. He was trying to sell his property, and he had 3 different buyers, and none of them get financed. And finally he thought, can't have this many people with bad credit. And when he talked to the loan broker about it, he said, you're never going to sell it with mixed use on it because you can't get it financed with the values, the land values in Lompoc. And ultimately, he ended up having to self-finance to sell the property. And I've heard that from several other people that wanted to purchase in that zone, that they just can't get financing. And so I think that's largely to blame for the fact that we literally have not built a single project in any of those mixed-use zones since we created them. I mean, it's a great concept. I think it'll work great. We just need to get the bugs out of it so something can happen, because we've in effect taken, 70 parcels and hung them out to do nothing. And when I talked to people about their parcels, that was what they complained about, not so much about the ordinance. And there's some things in the ordinance they'd like some tweaks, but they like the concept. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So you want to take a shot at a motion?
Sure. Marilyn, I move that council directs staff to proceed with Marilyn's proposal number 1 and my proposals number 2, 3, and 4 to take to the Planning Commission to be done concurrently with the Phase 2 update, not to detract from the completion date in September, if at all possible.
And I'll second that. Is there any other discussion on that?
City Administrator, did you need anything else besides that?
No, thank you. I think that's fairly clear.
Okay, could we have any other discussion? Let's go ahead and vote. That passes 5-0, thank you. Lucille, do we have any unresolved issues with regard to this item at this time?
No, thank you very much for your direction.
Okay. And now we'll move on to item number 9. Hyper. Yes.
Thank you, council members, Mr. Mayor, the audience, both here and at home. I'm here to present to you about on the topic of the grand jury, and particularly your response, your council response to a grand jury report titled "What is 211 and Will It Survive Santa Barbara County?" And I won't spend a lot of time going into detail. Hopefully the staff report was pretty self-evident, but just as an overview, they basically presented a cover letter and a report from the grand jury on the 211 system, and asked for our particular responses to both some findings and recommendations that they had. And so to that, I took the liberty of drafting what might be your response. You may have different response, but I just wanted to provide a framework at least of a response to the various findings and the recommendations that were involved. I would just give as an overview that it seemed to be my own personal takeaway from the report was that it would be hard for us to concur or refute some of the findings that were within the report, just because the portion of whatever the outcome or deliverable product of the report was, with the limited information we had available, I didn't see how we could draw conclusions one way or the other from certain things that were listed. I particularly am concerned because one of the findings had to do with whether or not the system was adequately funded, and I really was unsure whether we could have that finding. Overall, the system's definitely in trouble, and apparently the costs are exceeding revenues at this point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that throwing more money at it is the solution. It might be that your cost profile is higher than it needs to be. So for instance, they were proposing something like $189,000 a year budget, and they talked about handling 15,000 calls a year, and I did quick math in my mind and saw that it was working out to about $12.50 a call, and I couldn't help but wonder, just with my propensity toward using business metrics, how that compared to other 211 systems. It seemed a little high to me. Secondly was just the notion I'm further concerned with the business dynamics of the service, because the one stock and trade, if you will, is a list of referral resources. That is what the 211 system is all about, is getting people that have needs and make calls and get them referred to the resources that are available. And the observation within the report was it was several years out of date. That's akin to starving your chickens and trying to stay in the egg business. I mean, that is the core business, and if that's not being protected and done, then I'm not sure what's going on with the balance of the operation. I would say that I think 211 services are very valuable. I think they can be an incredible resource to citizens. I myself don't believe that the funding should, or at least need, come from municipalities. We are talking social services here, and I think that's more of the bailiwick of counties and nonprofit entities and faith-based organizations than it is municipalities. I know where I came from before being here in Lompoc. When I was working in Fresno, I happened to also concurrently serve on the board of directors for United Way of Fresno County. In the case of Fresno County, the 211 system is provided for, administered, and funded through United Way, and it is not the source. It is not funded via budgetary allocations from the cities, including not from the city of Fresno, despite having 500,000 residents who have themselves available to the services. So you saw what my draft responses were. I can go into detail with those if you'd like, but I just wanted to give you an overview and explain why I framed the response the way I did. It really is your response, the letters addressed to you as City Council to provide responses on behalf of the city, and my effort was merely to give you a framework to start with. If it works out that you're satisfied with it, that's great. If not, I have no pride of authorship. My nose isn't out of joint at all. Throw it all out or make any edits you'd like. But that concludes my report. I do. My recommendation is you approve the draft language, but if not, provide any edits you see fit. Thank you.
Bob, let me share a little background. When I was on the County Human Services Commission back in 2009 and 10, we had a presentation from the nonprofit group that then ran it. And the discussion then was that their call cost was fairly high and they were working on some things, and that's really all I remember about it. So I'm not going to give you any in-depth remembrances. And I didn't have time to go dig for the notes. But in October of 2013, Interim Administrator Gallivan and I attended the mayors and managers meeting at the Santa Maria Airport. And the principal topic of discussion there was a presentation from Santa Barbara County to the mayors of the cities within Santa Barbara County. And I guess I would say the core thing was, we need your money. And in our case, we had contributed a small amount of CDBG funds. I think at that point in time, Santa Maria wasn't contributing anything, but ours was not a substantial amount. And as a whole, most cities were not contributing, or were contributing a very small amount. And my recollection at that point was that they were running over $11 a call in the prior year, and it had been handled by an organization, and they had basically kicked it to the curb and said, here, county, it's yours. And then the county was running it through an organization in Ventura that operated a 211 call system there. So the mayor said, well, started asking questions. Well, do you have a website that people can go to get the same information? No, we don't have that. They have to call in. How current is your information on your call in? Oh, it's several years out of date. What is the principal type of call that you have? Oh, we don't know. And really the universal answer from all of the mayors, and Teresa, you can chime in, was, number one, it's not our responsibility, it's a social service responsibility, and that's a job that the county has. And number two, this is broken and you need to go fix it, and we're not going to pay to fix it. You can put your 2 cents in, Teresa.
Yes, my recollection from that meeting was that there was consensus among all the mayors that they were not in support of it at the time from the northern Santa Barbara County area because of the high cost of the calls, and so that was their finding.
And I think Mayor Schneider from Santa Barbara was there, and I know Mayor Aceves from Goleta was there. I don't remember if the rotational mayor from Carpinteria was there or not, but there was no support on the part from the mayors on the part of the cities to go forward and fund this, and we all felt that it was a county responsibility, number one. Number two, it was broken, and number three, they needed to fix it. So there's my history. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Weimiller, I wouldn't change anything in your report. I agree with it 100%. I think you did a good job. I have a couple of questions. Well, first I have a concern. I agree with the mayor and all the other mayors that it is the county's responsibility. Knowing this county, I don't think they're going to, number one, they don't have the money to address it. Number two, they won't address it. That being aside, have you talked to other city administrators concerning this grand jury report?
I have not. Well, I should say there was a cursory discussion when it first came out. So yes, we did. I was at a meeting It really had other purposes, more transportation oriented, but all the city managers were there from all 8 of the cities. And it was just the general topic that this grand jury report at that point would be coming out and that they were going to be seeking money, but I didn't get from them what their current individual positions would be as it relates to the grand jury recommendations. We had not seen this report at the time we met.
So I'm going to assume that their reports will be similar to this. I mean, I'm just going to make that assumption. Making that assumption, I guess we can assume that the grand jury will be back with a follow-up request from us then?
I wouldn't think that's beyond the realm of possibility, because certainly it's hard for us, as I'd said, despite whether you'd support or not support what they're seeking, the report was just a little short in terms of having enough information. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they came back perhaps with a more robust report and ask once again for our impressions at that point.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Public comment?
Oh, I have my lights on.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. So really quickly, I just wanted to go over what I know about 211. And so I'm glad you brought up the United Way. Now, I don't know if you guys know, so California, not every county in California has a 211 program. I believe it was started federally in 2000, and in California shortly thereafter. So it is a nationwide program, and the majority of California counties do participate. And in almost every one of those counties that do participate, you're right, it is United Way that manages the program and funds the program and does all of those kinds of things. Santa Barbara County is very unique, and you may know this or not, that there are more than one United Way. There are 2 United Ways. So instead of making it easier, in fact, it made it, there's a Northern Santa Barbara County.
No, it's the same entity, they just have 2 divisions.
Right, but the challenge was, the history as it's told to me, is that the 2 divisions have different priorities, and were not willing to take on the 211 program in Santa Barbara County at its inception. So you're right, FSA, the Family Service Agency, was the nonprofit organization in conjunction with a lot of different funders, City of Lompoc being a small funder at $2,000. I believe First 5, which is through the county, the actual county did, and there's a couple of jurisdictions, City Santa Barbara, I believe, gave quite a large chunk as well. And so I think that, because it is a relatively short history. It hasn't been around for that long. And I'm glad that you do put that in the letter, that you think that there is value, because I believe that probably a large component of where an effective 211 helpline can be of large value is decreasing costs in your police department. So a lot of it, and I believe that's why you have certain police departments, I'm not sure, I believe it was the City of Santa Barbara, maybe Goleta, that was in support because of that particular reason, right? So you're diverting calls that would normally go to the police department and spending staff time that could then go to a resource directory. So I do see value in it, but I do have the same challenge as a lot of the other council members in that I'm not sure that I support funding for the program, not because I don't think it could be made effective, and I know that's not even what we're discussing tonight, but I know that this is just a topic, so I wanted to talk about it. But because it's not a similar model in other counties, and I think that, all of our funding has many other places to go. My one question would be, and I'm not sure if there's a staff member who can answer that this evening, is, and I guess what I would say is look into this. If the city were to move forward with supporting the program, if we could do that through human service funds rather than through $2,000 of the general fund.
Certainly, we can look at different ways we might be able to support. I can tell you, and maybe sharing a little more of my personal experience that's not reflected in the report is because I was such an advocate of United Way in general when I served in Fresno and Fresno County. I also did a lot of work in fundraising including workplace giving campaign fundraising for United Way, and focusing, including on the benefits of 211, the value of supporting that. Certainly did it within the various work groups. I would typically make around 13 or 14 workplace presentations a year. Not that I was constantly doing these presentations, but for me to get around to all the different work locations and shifts, it took about 14 presentations. And I did that because I believed in the program and wanted to see it be successful, and we did that through in that case, a lot of workplace giving and just other community fundraising that we did. So I do see great values in that, but it's not my position that that's the core mission of what our city and therefore our city budget should be doing. There are entities that I would encourage to embrace and promote and fund this program. It's just not a city budget. And I did point out that at one point, I think in our previous budget cycles where we had provided $2,000 of support, current budget cycle doesn't have any. I thought one thing about the grand jury report was they were very kind in mentioning that we provide support in the city of Santa Barbara provided support, and the other six cities did not. And they were basically, one of their findings was, well, you other six should do like these two did. And I thought, well, they're being pretty gracious with us because our support was always fairly nominal. But
well, I'm glad you responded in the manner in which you did, because the grand jury is frustrating to me in that you're exactly right, that a lot of the grand jury reports seem to be on perception rather than finding the fine details, which would include that Lompoc doesn't currently have it slated for funding in the future. So I'm glad that you phrased your answer the way you did. My only question for council would be is if in recommendation 3 we might want to consider adding some language that, you know, if we found a viable funding stream to assist with this, that we would, you know, it would be something that to look at in the future. For example, like I was saying with human service funds, for example, you know, taking $10,000 a year and utilizing that to support this service, which in a very indirect way supports every single nonprofit within the community because it's providing a valuable resource guide that otherwise wouldn't exist. Does that make sense? So it's almost like marketing and promotion for every nonprofit in Lompoc indirectly by being on this resource guide. So I don't know if you're willing to do that, but I think under recommendation 3, by just kind of saying absolutely not, I think we're closing a door where maybe there may be some potential that we can look into in the future. So that's all.
I don't believe it's our responsibility to fund 211. I mean, they certainly have the opportunity to apply for funding through our Human Services Commission, as everyone else does.
Is that potentially something we can add to the language? Just that, you know, there is a potential funding stream that nonprofits can apply for in the city of Lompoc, which is human service funds, and they would have to compete with all the other nonprofits, something like that, you know.
City Administrator, how do you feel about that?
I write at your pleasure, so I would be quite comfortable adding that language, and I think there may be some value to leaving the door a little ajar at least. Certainly, one of the concerns I had as I wrote this would be the perception from the grand jury or from the county that we were just trying to say, nope, not interested. And that's not what I was trying to convey. I was trying to be very literal, though, in my responses to what their findings and recommendations were. But at the same time, I'm not opposed to leaving some opening and potential there. I would say I wouldn't want to spend money that otherwise would be available for purposes that we need to fill our core services, things like police, fire, and parks. And I think what you're recommending is not that route, but rather other funding that might fit this genre of use.
Correct. And, you know, I'm curious if at some point, if we do hear back from the grand jury, if we'd want to get any input from the Human Services Commission on this, or if we don't feel that that is the necessary course of action.
No, I think they would just consider it like any other application and weigh its value compared to other things. I mean, that's what they do now. They got applications for twice the money that they had, and they weighed them all out and decided which delivered the best value for the community.
Sorry, Mayor, my apologies. I don't think I was clear. What I meant is if we get a response from the grand jury in response to this letter, sort of about anything about 2-in-1 that we think would be applicable, I just think that they're a good resource to tap into as far as, the human service nature of this topic.
Sure, I'm certainly hoping that the end result is they salvage the program, that they make it once again robust and useful. We can certainly, you mentioned, the favorable, like we can, not only can it help us reduce some policing costs, but it can actually give us some policing resources, because as you know, a lot of times on calls, particularly domestic related calls, we end up having a social worker function that's going on with our officers, and it's a great resource if you're able to give people references to where their problems are. The police are called out because of a symptom arising from some other problem that's in the home that might be able to be addressed from a 211 service.
Okay, I don't know if I got the oral communication, but I'm going to try one more time. Anybody out there want to talk to us about this? Seeing no one rise, we close oral communications. We'll come back. I think probably our goal would be to approve the letter with the one edit that we discussed, and you're clear on what you're going to add for language
Yes.
to that. Okay, so I need a motion. All right, and a second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing no lights, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to item 10, award of contract to Broadspec Inc. for building management, plan check, and inspection services.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and one member of the public at least. It's here tonight, and those watching on TV also. Tonight's item is the result of an RFP that the city advertised. The scope is a full-service contract situation where the contractor would provide all management and staffing for the building department. City advertised for the RFP starting on December 9th, 2013. We advertised for 8 weeks and opened proposals on January 29th, and 4 proposals were received. The proposals were then compared against a pre-designated set of criteria and scored according to that criteria. There were five different categories to be scored, ranging from qualifications all the way to their fee proposal, with the fee proposal being the largest of the scorable items, representing 40% of the total score. As I mentioned, we had 4 proposals. The order of ranking when the scoring was done was what I'm going to say from top to bottom. So Charles Abbott Associates was our number 1, Broadspec was number 2, Schum's Coda was 3, and JAS Pacific was 4. We then started negotiations with our top-ranked consultant, Charles Abbott. Sat down with them and went through interviews, and then started negotiation for the contract. During that process, we identified that they had a very good proposal. Their company has a lot of resources. Their staffing was very qualified, but we found out that they intended not to place that staff here long term. They viewed that more as an interim, kind of a bridge to something else. And they weren't able to tell us what that ultimate staffing would be, and we decided not to then finalize a contract with them based on that information. Moved on to number 2, which is Broadspec, and open negotiations with Broadspec. A little background on Broadspec. They've been our contract service provider since 2011, so 3 years. And part of the RFP process was to identify your similar situations, your client list where you would provide this service, this full service, similar to what was proposed in Lompoc. Broadspec identified 5 different entities that they've done that in the last 3 years. So they definitely have the experience and background to provide the service. In addition to Lompoc, one notable city is the city of Bellflower, which they provide a similar service. The scope would be, from the customer service point of view or from the customer's point of view, very similar to what we've experienced the last 3 years. So building official here every day, building inspectors, staffing up and down as the need arises. So there would be some new faces as maybe the summertime comes around and there's a need for more people here to provide all those services. The contract calls for performance criterias. They have to do certain things in a certain amount of time, but they have the flexibility to staff up and staff down as they see fit. One notable upgrade from the last time around that we're really pleased about is the idea of local plan checks. Before, plan checks, they didn't have staffing in-house to complete those plan checks with the people here in Lompoc. So those would be bottled or packaged together, sent off, plan checked remotely, packaged together, sent back to the applicant. That takes some time, and there was some wasted time, we felt like. So we felt like we can improve that this time around, and we've addressed that. They've committed to at least 75% of plan checks to be done by staff located right here in the city of Lompoc, probably here at City Hall, and we're excited about that. From the compensation side of things, I kind of view this as a hybrid time and materials contract. The compensation for the building official is a straight hourly rate. We'll pay them $75 an hour for every hour that the building official provides services. And then they will also get on top of that 25% of the building permit revenue with a minimum of $11,000 per month. There's also a criteria to scale back that somewhat if we feel like that we need to, and the revenues aren't keeping up with our expenses, although I don't anticipate that will be necessary. There is a provision for 6 hours a week service reduction totally at the city's discretion. These fees are fixed for the term of the contract, which is 5 years, so we don't have to renegotiate anything. We know what our costs will be for the next 2 budgets at least. So I think that's a good idea also. From a comparison point of view, we looked at the last completed fiscal year revenues and applied the compensation terms in the new contract just for a comparison point of view, and since we already know what we spent based on the old contract. When you do that comparison, we come out about $33,000 ahead compared with what we spent last time for probably better service. So we think that's a win for everybody. So in conclusion, like I said, I think this is a great contract for the city of Lompoc. We keep the existing staffing that our contractors and developers are used to. We're building on those relationships that have already been established and continue to provide those services. It's a win for Broadspec. They keep their employees employed. And we save the general fund $33,000. I wanted to also point out Steve Patterson is here tonight, the president of Broadspec, and Sarah Roan, who is our building official. I'm sure they'd be happy to speak to you also. And with that, we recommend that the City Council award the consultant services to Broadspec for the services provided through June 30th, 2019, and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. And I'm available for any questions.
Kevin, would you share with the council what you shared with me with regard to digital plan check in the future?
Digital plan check was one of the scoreable items that everybody proposed on. The city in the RFP put out what we would like to see, and the proposers then responded back with what they could provide. I would say that nobody gave us exactly what we wanted. Nobody scored a perfect score on that digital plan check. There is provisions for Broadspec to provide digital plan spec. I think it's within 30 days. They have to have a system that is internet-based, where project stakeholders will submit plans, calculations, and other information electronically, directly from their computer with no need for printing or shipping, and receive comments back electronically. So that is a contract requirement for this new term.
Okay. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Mr. McCune, I'm wondering, how did we rate their service previously?
They have, I think they excel in customer service. They certainly have, they're focused on providing that personalized service. So that's the positive side. We have had staff turnover, so that was a negative side of it. So in the end, obviously, my recommendation is to award them to it, and I think their positives outweigh their negatives. But there's probably some room to build on the momentum that we have. So I think we have a good team here now, and I think that will take us into the future.
Okay, so there's no large complaints on file with this contract from customers or anything like that?
No, on the contrary. The staff that we have now, actually, I've received positive feedback. I haven't had any negative complaints about them.
And what is the avenue for customer feedback? Is it just as they choose to email you, or is there an easy way for people to provide feedback about the service?
Yeah, just to contact me. Usually I'll get routed those calls when they come into the switchboard and say, I have a complaint about the building department, and they'll route them to me. So I hear them that way.
Okay, I guess that would be my only component that I would be looking for is that this is sort of a fluid contract in my mind, that things and priorities change, and we need to hear the feedback from the customers and be able to shift or have Broadspec address any of those things. I've received both positive and negative comments, but nothing that rose to the level. It was more of me explaining and educating and things like that. So I'm just curious, and I think for me it would have been helpful to have an avenue for them to provide feedback that then we can utilize when we're discussing these things with Broadspec, whether that be on an annual basis or however that could work. That's the only component I see that I would like to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Humdahl.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm glad to hear your report and that you're very much supportive. I think the real plus, since they've done a good job and you like them, is that they're going to be staying here. So their staff already knows what Lompoc looks like. If you bring in somebody new now, even though they were concerned where they were, you're going to have to show them around, know where everything's at, and where the developments are and are. They're up and running immediately, and I think that's the real plus in it. I have yet to hear any bad comments about how they've done their job, so some people have, but I sure have not. I'm glad to see it, but I think the real plus is that if they have met the criteria and you see what they like, we don't have to show them around town. They know where things are at and they're ready to go.
Now let's take a second and we'll go for public comment. Anyone here want to talk to us about this item? He says no. Okay, we'll close oral communication. We'll come back to the council. What I would say, in any business enterprise, there will occasionally be a complaint. And when those complaints were brought to my attention, they were usually solved by the time I got the complaint over to city staff to go talk to them. And in one case, her predecessor came to me and said, oh, this guy just got in my hair, and I was a little rude with him, and so I'm going out there this afternoon to fix it. And he went and fixed it. From a positive side, the folks that built Rocket Town said that we facilitated their project to the point that we probably shaved 20 days off the project because of the way inspections were facilitated and things moved forward. We can't turn the camera off, so now I have to tell my secret to the whole world. The written guarantee that was developed in the beginning, which you're not going to change, right? I'm looking at you guys in Broadspec. You're not changing the written guarantee. No, okay, good. I just wanted to receive assurance. has been a very valuable economic development tool for us, way beyond the cost of those pretty sheets of paper. So that's been really good. The one place that I would say we came up a little short before was on the digital plan check. And just to make me feel good, maybe you could come up and tell us that you've got this digital thing worked out. Not personally, because you're my age, so, you hire one of these young guys to do it for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You're right. At my age, absolutely, it's true. The digital plan check element is a software component that those who manufacture the item, they sell their product. That's what they do. What we try to do is the application of a product. In this case, we own ours. Ours, my IT people actually made it ourselves. We developed it over a 6-month period about 4 years ago. We like that because we have total control of the system itself. We developed the software, so now we can modify it, adjust it as we get feedback, and that's what we do. It's readily available. What I should caution everybody about is the digital plan checking has a definite place in what we're doing today and what is being done throughout California and the United States. Absolutely does. But it does not have the imagery that the software people would like to sell people. It's not a complete solve everything world. It's not. The simplicity of it is a design firm puts their design and sends it over by, as I call the airwaves of email, etc. And the plan checking disciplines, structural, mechanical, electrical, architectural, and such, will be reviewing it. As they're doing that, the design team does not put in their budget to the owners that they're going to sit by their desk and watch us do it. That's time is money to design firms. The real concept is a quick exchange of information. I'm pleased to tell you that we've been able to adjust our system, adapt our system to the environment of whatever community it's being used in. In some areas where we're dealing with a $1 billion project, a single project that's $1 billion, we expand that capability because we might have anywhere from 5 to 20 design professionals feeding us information at one time. In smaller communities, that doesn't happen that way, so we're able to adapt it to where we have a quicker, faster response to people so that they don't have to sit back and sit at their tables, their design tables, and see what we're doing. So we do the direct communication along with the airwave system. So yes, we've made adjustments in our system, Mr. Mayor, and we're constantly doing it. And I can share with you, the better part of why Broadspec is the right choice for you is when we make the adjustments to our owned property, you don't pay. There's no cost to you when we do that. Software companies, they thrive on that element. There's a change coming. Oh, by the way, we have an update for this program, and it's only $25,000 this month. That's the benefit of what we like, and that's why I went through the expense 4 years ago to have this built by IT professionals, actually in Ohio, which is part of our mainframe. And they put it together, and it took them a few months, more than I liked because they were on the hourly tab when they were doing it, but we got it. But the idea is that we can adapt it for the community, and that's what we hope we have done for the city of Lompoc.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, who'd like to make a motion?
I'm glad to make the motion to accepting the contract. I believe that's the way you'd want it.
And a second. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Any written communications, City Clerk?
Nothing.
And oral communications. This is your last opportunity to talk to us for 2 minutes. Not everybody at once. Okay, seeing none, we'll close oral communications. Council requests meeting reports, starting with Mr. Holmdahl.
Okay, real good. I was at the Valley Haven ribbon cutting today, and if ones that haven't been down to see the building, they've done a beautiful job on it. And I'm real pleased to see it. It's up and running. I'm glad to see that happen. And then the other thing I've been to is, like the others, the Little League kickoff, which was last Saturday. And then last Friday, Patrick and I did a tour of the ghetto, and he got to meet several of the wineries and good comments. In fact, Rich Longoria, who was the one building the new building, had no negatives at all. So I'm glad to get Patrick down there to show him what we have down there. And he's some of the same people who gave the wine when we give that basket out. And he also got to talk to the bread maker. So we had a good time. So that's the three things I've got.
Councilmember Costa?
Nothing to report except for the Vargas Jeweler proclamation, which was just impressive and very emotional. You know, it was just a really great moment for that business. So I was really happy to be there.
Councilmember Lingle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended several events throughout the community, but there was none at city expense. Probably the most rewarding was on the 10th. Annually, I do scholarship interviews for high school seniors for the Santa Barbara Foundation. And it never ceases to amaze me what a talented bunch of individuals that are coming up. I think Mr. Weimiller mentioned it last meeting, how fortunate we are, the youth that we have coming into our society. Too often we focus on the negative ones. It was just a great group of kids that I interviewed. And I just can't say enough about our youth coming up right now. We should all be proud of them.
Councilmember Starbuck?
I'm not going to make any reports, but a small council request. The next time you two guys go somewhere, why don't you invite me? Sounded like fun. I would have saved you.
You've been our driver.
Okay, the first thing is I have a request from the judge in charge of the grand jury looking for applicants for the grand jury for me to recommend. So all of you out there in TV land and all of you here on the council, please look around and see if we can't find some grand jury members. As we know, we have not been well represented on the grand jury in the past, so
I recommend Jim Mosby.
You need to have someone that agrees to that. Last week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, as the SBCAG delegate, I attended CalCog, which is the State Association of Councils of Government, and there were several takeaways, but one that's very important is beginning January 1st, 2015, we will in California be paying somewhere between 15 and 25 cents a gallon in greenhouse gas tax for all of our fuel purchases. Nobody really knows what it's going to be yet. That money will be $250 million, or approximately a quarter of it will be going to high-speed rail, but the bulk of it will be coming back to local organizations and councils of government to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that would seem pretty simple because it's transportation money coming back to transportation, but actually their outlook is completely different. Their goal is to reduce GHG emissions by any means that affects transportation. So the example that was given when I asked the question, it was after about 4 hours and was in the last 3 minutes, and I think it was the pearl of the discussion. Well, what would that look like? And the presenter said, well, let's assume that you have a jobs housing imbalance in your community and you need more housing, but you can't build any more houses because your sewer plant's at near capacity. You could use this money to enlarge your sewer plant so that you could build the houses next to the jobs. Now, obviously, that's not the problem we have. We have the inverse. We have the houses and the people, but without the jobs. So just random discussion, you could then use some of this money to put in infrastructure to facilitate jobs creation. So you could, let's say you needed a street or you needed electrical infrastructure, these funds could be used for that purpose. So we all need to kind of broaden our thinking because that's coming in the first quarter of next year. And we will need to have those shovel-ready projects on our lips. Our mayor's luncheon 2 weeks ago was at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and they were talking about the effects of sequestration and how that had been a pretty big drain on them, and now they're dealing with the budget cuts, which is delegated from the top down. If they got a fair share hit based on their total number of blue suiters out there, they would lose about 400. They expect the number to be more down in the 200 range because their mission is being expanded rather than contracted. And they also commented that they're using a lot of help from the federal prison now to meet some of their needs. I was at the Little League opening with several folks, and also I was with Patrick at the Texas Hold'em, and he is now the card shark of Lompoc, having finished third in the live to the final hand. So if you guys, keep your money belt tight around your waist if you're playing poker with him. Bob and I were at the Flower Festival Queens introduction the other evening. I had to leave to go to the Vandenberg Spouses Club. They do an auction to raise scholarship money, and I was helping with the auction. It's an amazing auction. When did you see a cake sell for $120? And yeah.
When you bought it?
No, I didn't buy that one. That was a little out of my, but they raised a great deal of money. We also had the Youth Leadership Lompoc Valley. I had them in the other day, and that was a pretty interesting group. They're pretty excited. And just this is on behalf of Mr. Mosby, an announcement. The Santa Barbara County Parks Commission will meet here in City Hall on Thursday at 9:30. So come on down if you have some things to say to the Parks Commission. I intend to be here. Some of the things that I might like to talk about are the $700,000 Gaviota restroom, the $280,000 Halama restroom, and the multi-million-dollar soccer expansion at Waller Park after the Board of Supervisors told us they didn't have any money for any projects in the Lompoc Valley. Just a couple things on the payables that we did today. Our contribution to CalPERS in this batch of checks was $850,000. So just know that that number keeps inching up, and we're working to raise the money to cover it. And our electric bill, we paid $440,000 to the state of California for greenhouse gas emissions on behalf of the electricity we buy from the Northern California Power Agency. So there's a nice fat tax that's coming through, and it's on your electric bill. That's about $33 per meter in Lompoc. And that is all I have to report. We are therefore adjourned to a special meeting on Tuesday, March 25th at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, which will be our midterm budget review. And we invite you all to come and join us. Thank you.